So for the community's sake, just so everybody knows, if I can just get your attention for just 1 second. The meeting is to start at 5:30, but city council is in closed session right now. So when they come out, just give them a few minutes to get organized and then they'll start things. So feel free to chat and visit with each other, but you'll know when they come out. You'll see them line up there and then we'll get the meeting started right after that, okay?
Yeah, but we need to have the attorney report. Who reports that? He reports there's no activity? Okay, got it. Yeah. It's nice to see so many people come to hear about our closed session. Actually, I think we're here for other things, but I'm going to have you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So to report out a closed session, the city council met to discuss item 3A. There was no reportable action.
All right. So I don't know if this is a first, but we're going to end the meeting, and now we're going to start a meeting. So that might be the first time in our history. So that's meeting is over, and now we start. Pretty awesome. Okay, welcome everybody. We are going to start with the call of order, and we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everybody would like to stand, and we'll get going. So, Councilor Resner, would you like to lead us?
Mm-hmm. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We don't have a prayer, so no. All right, we will start with roll call.
Councilmember Audette,
Here.
Danuka,
President.
Munns,
Here.
Resner,
Present.
and Mayor Latoff.
Here. Looks like everybody is here. So we're going to get going with a public hearing today. We're going to have a presentation from Development Services. Today's public hearing is to consider an appeal application regarding the tentative subdivision map application. It's the Peak subdivision for the development of a residential subdivision consisting of 120 single-family lots on a 114-acre parcel located at 850 Quartz Hill Road in a residential single-family district. So we're going to start with a presentation and then, I'm sorry? Oh, public.
Do we have regular?
We do not have any regular public comment today. Public comment is only on the item before us today. So after the presentation, we will go to public comment at that point where everybody will get a chance to speak. And, just reminders, we're not able to interact so much with the audience. So I think but we do want to make sure we allow plenty of time to hear from everybody today. After we have public comment, that'll allow us a chance to be able to ask questions, have discussion, and provide ample time and plenty of time to discuss this matter today. So welcome everybody. I'm glad everybody is here, and I think we'll start the presentation. So.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, community members. My name is Jeremy Pagan. I'm the Director of Development Services for the City of Reading. Our presentation today to the council will be taking place with multiple members of city staff. And so to start things off, we'll have David Schlegel, Senior Planner with the Planning Division, get things going. And then we'll be rotating up here and kind of tag teaming this presentation for the council. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to David.
Thank you. Just first off, want to apologize. The title slide should actually reference the appeal number, as this was a project that went before the Planning Commission, was unanimously approved and then later appealed. The appeal is 2025-01438. Yes, it is for the Peaks subdivision, 120 lot subdivision on a 114-acre site in the northwest quadrant of our city. Long planned for development in our area. It's a primary growth area in our general plan, and this is just a location map showing you where it's located. At the boundary of our city beyond to the west is unincorporated Shasta County or federally owned land. In general, the area is single-family residential to the east and south in the city boundaries, and outside of that would be rural residential in the county and managed lands, federal lands elsewhere to the west. And this is just kind of showing you aerial imagery of the site. As you can see, it's vacant land with some WAPA power lines running north-south on the property. Some of the green area shows you upper tributaries of Carter Creek and some seasonal drainages. And to the east there, some connections to the River Ridge Terrace subdivision neighborhood at Steamboat Street and Keel Court. And we also have sewer lines in the ground spanning this property. And there's easements and maintenance roads, obviously, on the property as well. Again, the general plan for the area is single family with some greenway following the slope terrains. Residential density would be 2.5 units per acre. And that's the same thing with our zoning district for the property. And I just want to highlight some of the other constraints other than the WAPA power lines. It's the slope topography. You can see our general plan actually doesn't count residential density if you're over 20% slope, so that's what that white hatched area is. So we wouldn't get credit, no developer would get credit for developing that density. They wouldn't get credit for the land to count towards density, I'm sorry. And this is just kind of showing you what that looks like from bird's eye view to the northwest. And another bird's eye view southeast. Obviously, those WAPA power lines take up a lot of developable flat land on this site. And, you know, it is a city application, a city project, so there's a lot of history behind that, and I just wanted to pass it off to City Manager Steve Bade to go over that, and along with the financing for the project.
Honorable Mayor and members of council and the community. So this property has been with the city of Reading since 2003. So we've been monitoring this property for many years. It has had a few different transitions over that time. So we originally purchased it through a utility tax delinquency sale, and it came with, so we purchased it, I believe, for $2,500, and there was about $900,000 in debt that was secured to that property. The city ended up buying it, paying off that debt. I think the debt was paid off in around 2005. In 2008, the city of Reading had the city of Reading had the Reading Redevelopment Agency purchase the property, and so it was purchased at that time. Prior to 2011, and it actually being part of the redevelopment agency, it was part of a dissolution act that was orchestrated by the state. So once that occurred in 2011, the property then transferred to the successor housing agency, which it is an asset of that today. So along with that, once it was purchased with the redevelopment funding, that does trigger it to be a housing type of development. It was originally purchased for that reason, but then it also places additional requirements in regards to the development that occurs there, whether that's single family or multifamily. It would be subject to redevelopment law, which is state law, and that's still active today. And so depending on what type of project, it would have a potential affordability covenant that could range between 45 and 55 years, depending on what is negotiated out for that development. Following the Carr fire, the city was placed in a unique position to receive federal community development block grant disaster recovery funding. And we had a unique project because we owned the property. And with CDBG dollars, if you're able to complete infrastructure improvements in a low and moderate income census tract area, then you would qualify for that funding. We did qualify for that reason. And staff was very unique in our approach. We are the only ones in the United States that have proposed a project like this, where you're going to build the infrastructure to create a single-family development. So it is an opportunity that we saw as we're looking to recover from the Carr fire and recover from those houses that were lost at that time. And so we, in that application, we guaranteed the state that we would do at least 120 lots. So the funding that is available today is specifically for the pre-development, which includes the environmental process, the design, and then also building the infrastructure for the subdivision and creating those 120 single-family lots. With that, right now, we're in the first phase of that. We have one agreement, and that was awarded to K2 Development for the oversight of that process. So they're assisting the city of Reading go through the process to get to entitlements, and that's where we're kind of in that process right now. Beyond that, once we're done with the entitlement process, if it's approved, then we would go to completing the design of the civil plans and putting it out to bid, and then the construction portion of the project would occur after that bid. So it would be a public contract. It would be oversaw by K2 and our Public Works Division. And then once it was developed, it would be available for sale. Now that the sale of those lots has not been determined. That's the third phase and the third agreement that will come to City Council for consideration. It could go to one developer, it could go to two developers. We don't know how that's going to play out. It could be 4 or 5. It depends on how we negotiate and what the council's palette is for that development at the time. But the goal will be to construct 120 units, 61 would be income restricted, and 59 would be market rate. So when we talk about how are those lots going to be developed and sold, well, 59 will be sold out on the regular market. A realtor will sell those, and market rate people will purchase those. The ones that are restricted, right now, it hasn't, the details are not specific yet because we haven't negotiated that deal and council hasn't approved it. But if we do something similar to what we've done in the past, similar to what we've done in redevelopment, and whether it was in a variety of neighbors within the community or neighborhoods in the community, there's a resale restriction agreement that goes along with that property. And depending on the funding sources for the secondary financing on that property, that would drive that level of secured affordability. And so it could range typically between 20 and 45 years. But that's to be negotiated. It could even be less. It depends on the funding sources that's going to be associated with that. And so the structure of that is that there would be a mortgage from a private bank, just like anyone else gets a mortgage on their property. And then the balance, so when we have a restricted property, there's going to be a market value. Let's say that market value is $400,000. And we decide that based on calculations, the restricted sale price becomes $300,000. Well, the buyer is going to be responsible for that first $300,000 on a private loan, and then there'll be a secondary financing, just like a home buyer loan that you would get on the market today. And that would make up so that we're protecting the value of the whole neighborhood. And so if it's same thing, if it was $450,000 and we had to bring in $150,000, that would be the secondary financing in that. So we want to make sure we're protecting the value of those units. The city, we could be a portion, we could offer those secondary loans through our home buyer program. We do that. We've been doing that since probably in early 70s, late 70s. So 1974, I think, is when we started doing loans for affordable housing and single-family properties. And today, we probably have a few hundred home buyers in the community, and we monitor those loans. We would do the same monitoring that we do with our portfolio. I think we have probably a $75 million portfolio that we manage. So we are experienced in that mortgage financing and multifamily financing and single. So we do get involved with that, but we're utilizing grant funds to create those secondary loans. And then when those are paid back, we put them in a revolving loan fund, and then we reuse it in the community to create other opportunities for income qualifying housing. So that's really the kind of the financing portion of that and how that would play out, but that's still to be determined. Otherwise, I think that answers everything that's on the slide, I believe. So.
Thank you. Yeah, and so it being a city project, we had a lot of early public outreach that wouldn't otherwise be done for a private development. We had 2 workshops, on-site special meeting. We also noticed well beyond the 300-foot minimum radius of the project site. I think it went out about half mile, capturing all the neighborhoods on Courts Hill. And we got a lot of early public feedback that staff was hoping to be responsive to throughout this process. We let our consultant loose on studying an additional road to the north to Courts Hill at the request of neighbors, and that would potentially change traffic patterns. Ultimately, Road D, stretching to the north, would go through county land, private land. It would require a lot of extensive grading and environmental impact to the north there. There are right-of-way issues in the county that would potentially require eminent domain, and ultimately the cost ballooned to a point where it wouldn't be feasible to incorporate it as part of this project. So that's why you don't see that being recommended. We also had requests for lots to be designed with buffers from existing neighborhoods or existing residential lots. And I'll get into that a little bit in a second here. I just wanted to point out that, yeah, we have a couple city-owned parcels as a result of this design that the consultant brought to us, with a city park site as well. And obviously, there's a lot going on with the extent of the slope terrain and where we're able to build. So that you see the development does follow the terrain with the roads going where they can go, essentially. And just highlighting some of the other constraints, what that does to the site. We also have environmentally sensitive areas that we're avoiding and detention areas that are needed. And the grant ultimately calls for a minimum of 120 lots. And that is exactly the number that was designed here. And so I think that kind of answers kind of the question or concern of why these lots are backing up to existing residential neighborhoods. It's not really an incompatible land use in the eyes of planning. However, we did look into that, and ultimately the developable lots that are being shown here are essentially where we have room to put them. And now we're just going to talk about some of the features of the site or of the subdivision that would be an added benefit, more than what a private developer would bring. The east-west and north-south trails that would provide emergency vehicle and maintenance access to vegetation zones is considered a really key improvement or key addition for the fire marshal. It's also an amenity for folks who will be living in the area. I just wanted to show those. A broader view of this would be a longer trail network throughout that part of our city, connecting potentially down to the Sacramento River. And this goes a long way in getting us towards that. The subdivision would include landscaping and common areas, improvements that would be managed and obviously designed to improve the aesthetic of the subdivision. Another key component that otherwise a private developer would not be bringing is this architectural design guidelines, which is part trying to raise the bar on architectural design and creating more of a front porch community, and also trying to provide higher standards for fire-resistant components of the subdivision, of the construction, not just of the homes, but around the homes with 5-foot non-combustible zones. They call them Zone 0, ensuring that we're using the best practices out there to make sure that we're bringing a fire-hardened community in this area and kind of setting that standard. And in addition to that, any subdivisions built in the city in the very high fire hazard severity zone is required to have a vegetation management plan. The vegetation management zones start with 100-foot Zone 1 from all buildable areas, which basically brings the brush down to 0 and limbs up all healthy trees and makes sure fire can't turn into something that fire department can't manage. And then beyond that, an additional 100-foot of 50% clearing. And that is all included in this subdivision as part of a landscape maintenance district that would be funded by the subdivision itself, the folks who live there, through an assessment, along with the public parks, stormwater treatment, storm drain systems. I think I'm covering all those features. To get us to why we're here today is that after the Planning Commission approved it, we did receive appeals. 12 different appellants filed appeals of the approval. And trying to summarize all of them, and down here we have concerns with the detrimental traffic volumes to the adjacent neighborhood, Spinnaker Drive, Courts Hill Road, and the general road need for Road D, which I just covered. Also mentions of Buenaventura Bridge needing to be built. We also had concerns about emergency access itself. CAL FIRE reports that are out there suggesting secondary access being for existing subdivisions, and that the project doesn't have adequate secondary access, which we'll touch on in a minute here. And emergency fire escape overall, a big issue, obviously, with the history of this site. So evacuation congestion going down Courts Hill, unsafe conditions. We also received some comments about the analysis itself that we have supporting this decision, and a mention of the park site in that analysis not being an adequate safe refuge. Staff report addresses that, and we can get into that as well. We also had some appellants raise the issue of the EIR, our general plan EIR. I'll just probably address that when I get to CEQA, and just kind of go over these. Subdivision design, I mentioned that previously, and we also had some comments on preserving blue oak trees on the site and the adequacy of botanical surveys when it comes to impacts on biological resources. First, want to start with the access. This is obviously the site plan showing you where connections are. We have a requirement not only with state law for 2 points of public access, but also in our residential fire code, Reading Municipal Fire Code. And so this is just showing you where those connection points are. We have Steamboat Street connecting on the east side along with Keel Court. That gets you over to Courts Hill Road via Spinnaker Drive and Old Lantern. And then Road A punching through BLM land to Buenaventura Boulevard, that's the second access point. Just kind of showing you those access points. And ultimately, those access points meet the standard. But what I want to point out is in these CAL FIRE reports is River Ridge Terrace, a portion of it was identified by CAL FIRE as not having secondary access. And this project would actually provide that for that subdivision. So it's fulfilling the recommendation in the CAL FIRE report. And so Steamboat Street, Keel Court now has egress to Buenaventura Boulevard. And it's just a larger zoom out of circulation overall. Another part of the Public Resources Code talks about not having a circular traffic pattern, and that's obviously not happening here either. You can get out to Courts Hill Road, you can get out to Keswick Road, and Keswick Dam Road. You can get to Buenaventura Boulevard and onward elsewhere in the city, either to the north, east, or west. And in addition to that, I just kept this slide in here from the Planning Commission meeting. It does actually provide improved circulation overall in the Courts Hill area. It doesn't necessarily provide a secondary access for the Stanford Hills subdivision to the south or Land Park there, but it does give an additional pathway, and this was talked about. We worked closely with fire, and this was a huge benefit to the fire chief every time we talked about circulation in this area. And in terms of emergency fire escape, so obviously wanted to be sensitive to that. There was a very major fire that happened with a chaotic fire escape. And so we looked at what we're able to do with CEQA and understanding the impacts of that, and looked for guidance out there on how to analyze it, how to analyze emergency evacuation, and found the Attorney General guidance that tells you what to study, and then who makes that decision. Ultimately, the fire chief and police chief, the people who operate the emergency operations plan and the emergency evacuation plan. You look to them with the information that we studied and ask them whether it would impair their operations. And with that, I'd like to invite Jay Summerlin, our fire chief, to go over some of that process and what we looked at.
Mayor, City Council. I'm Jay Summerlin. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief and your Fire Marshal for the City of Reading. First thing is this development meets all fire codes and actually exceeds it in several areas. So there's no worry. If this were done outside of a public project, we would have approved this the way it is designed. So no matter who brought this before us, it meets all the thresholds of the fire code for this development. And it's not lacking in any of those aspects. When we were asked to provide our recommendations for emergency evacuations of a region, we looked on our past experience, both as firefighters and previous experience with evacuating large-scale emergencies, looking at other case studies of how other fire departments have done these things. And what we decided is when you're doing software, when you use software to do an evacuation plan, typically what you do is you select the region that you want to evacuate and say, where do you want all those vehicles to go? And you put a little marker of, I want all the cars from this region to go to this area. And then it runs the dynamics that it does in the back and tells you how long it'll take all the people that are in those vehicles to get from point A to point B. And it'll come up with a number. It'll take you an hour to get that many people that are in that area to that point. Well, the problem with that is typically where we want people to evacuate for in this area would be like the rodeo grounds. Well, they truly are safe once they get out of the area that the fire is directly impacting. So what we gave the engineers that did the study for the plan is that we felt that if the fire from our scenario was where those red points were, that was an unsafe place for the public to be. I don't want you on those roads. I want you out of that area as soon as I can get you out of that area. But when you get into the yellowish orange areas, you would be safe. It would be scary there because it's going to be dark. It's going to be embers flying everywhere. but you are actually in a safe place, especially on Quartz Hill Road. Once you get into the areas that are developed, where you have housing developments on both sides, it is very difficult for you to be overrun by a fire wave, a fire coming through Quartz Hill Road once you've hit there. So you're in a safe place, but we really want you to down into the green areas, and that's what we've identified. So when they went and analyzed this, they were looking, instead of going to the rodeo fairgrounds or rodeo grounds to be safe, they chose somewhere on Quartz Hill Road or one of the green areas on the map. And so that was the data we gave them. So like I said, a hot zone, a warm zone, and a cold zone is common terminology that is used in the fire service. It's something that we use on every structure fire. We use it in hazardous materials calls. And it's something OSHA looks at when you're looking at firefighting and how we do things. So we use that common practice that's used in other areas of the fire service and did it for this. And that's how we started coming around with areas of safe refuge, or if you even just stacked cars on Quartz Hill and they weren't even moving, they would still be in a safe place from where the fire's at. And it provides a buffer of time for firefighters to either contain the fire or traffic to continue to move and move those people out. Next slide. During the car fire, that section that's highlighted on this screen was under construction. There were barricades up, there was heavy equipment in a road. Worst possible time to have road construction at this level in our jurisdiction is right when we need to evacuate that area. So when people tell you it took them 3 hours plus to get out, believe them, it probably did. Because you can't transverse across dirt roads very well. And we had power lines down on Keswick for a period of time that had to be cleared. So there were some delays of roads through that time. And so what they will tell you is true. It did take them that amount of time. It was a very unique time for this city during the car fire. And there's been a lot of lessons learned, and there's been a lot of changes in how we do things emergency operation-wise and plan check-wise on new developments. Next slide. So again, the picture on the left is what it looked like. This is what it looks like today. So when you have irrigated stuff on both sides or one side of the road, the odds of fire coming across that and enveloping anybody that's parked there or slowly moving is very low. So that's why this type of area is a safe area of refuge as they move on out of the area. Next slide. So since the car fire, the entire county and actually most of the state of California fire departments and municipalities have moved to a product called Genesis Protect. There's the other side of it, it's called Genesis Alert, and that's the public side of it for being notified when we are evacuating or sheltering in place. And when we built out the zones for our community, the police department, fire department, public works, and our GIS division, we sat down and analyzed the city and looked at it from different viewpoints. One of them obviously was wildfire and the amount of people in each zone. And then we looked at what would happen if we have a breach of the dam. What do they work together? Do I need to readjust? So we started readjusting. And then we looked at just general flooding. Then we looked at hazardous materials event. If a train derailed downtown with Bakken oil and we had a huge fireball burning down half of the city, where would I need to evacuate people? How large are each of those individual zones? And we made a determination based off of multiple scenario types, the different sizes of them for proper evacuation. And so you put that whole system together, you link that up with the county, with other agencies in the state, and we can all use a product together. On the back end of Genesis Protect, there are tools for looking at the rate of speed of a fire burning, and those are some of the same tools colleges use for predictive modeling. And so those are some of the tools that we used to develop what a baseline fire that we're going to give the engineers to look at. And so we said, I want worst case weather conditions. This is where I want the fire to start. And this is the wind speed, direction, the humidity, the fuel moisture levels for all the different fuel categories. And you put that into the system and it will tell you and show you on the map where the fire is going to burn to and hour by hour, which zones are going to be affected or have to be So when you're looking at it, you can say, okay, my fire started here in 5 hours. I need to evacuate these zones as we move forward. And that's how we do predictive modeling for future events. So when we are making decisions, we're using trusted technology to determine the rate of spread of fire and what zones in the future that I'm going, 5 hours from now, who am I going to have to get rid of? Who needs to leave? What kind of buildings are in there? Are there nursing homes? Because now I have to deal with the public health department because that's who's in charge of them. And so there's a lot of stuff that starts getting spooled up as we forecast way ahead. And so the idea is that we're no longer just saying, the entire west side of City of Reading, I need you to evacuate. It's going to be zone by zone, and we're releasing vehicles as we watch the roads and where choke points are. And as we do that, it's coordinated very closely with the police department, state patrol, sheriff's department, all the law enforcement's there doing the evacuations for us. I think the biggest weakness is the public not recognizing that there's an emergency, not listening to when we told them to leave and they hang out, and then it's too late because the fire's already on top of them. Then they're in a panic, they're in a really bad place. And that is probably the most dangerous part of evacuations. It's so bad that on a national level, we've been asked as a Reading Fire Department, we've already sat in with, I believe it's Texas A&M and USDA, and we're part of this group that is looking at evacuations on a national level and problems. And they're even posing questions out as, if I paid you money to leave, would you leave? I mean, it's that desperate of a thing that they're looking at a national level of how do you convince the public to listen to the government telling them to leave? It's dangerous, go away. And there's a lot more studying, and there's a lot of PhDs that are behind this study trying to figure out what the heck we're going to do, because people don't believe their government. And that's a problem, especially when it's a life and death thing like wildfire and how fast it moves. Because if you don't want to leave, it's really hard for me to help you. But if you follow our warning, I can get you out in a reasonable time and we'll get you safe. The other things that we've done is we worked with our traffic control. So anytime a road is being developed where they're going to tear up something and redesign it, that comes through a review process through the planning group with permits, and it's looked at on, are you planning on shutting the entire road down? Does your plan leave lanes open? If it leaves lanes open and they have a plan built for cars being able to still get through, it'll be permitted and moved through. But if they're saying, no, I need to shut the whole road down, then another process in the city happens where we evaluate what their plan is to make emergency access so cars can actually go across it after hours or during construction. If like in the middle of the day, we're like, I'm evacuating this area, implement your plan. It's in place. All construction companies that work with the city follow those rules, and they won't be permitted unless they have all of that documentation for us. We've expanded, again, with Genesis Protect and Alert, our communication systems with the public. We've also enhanced our radio system for all city employees to be able to communicate. And we have a state-of-the-art emergency operations center where each division within the city is able to communicate, sitting next to each other, figuring out problems that the city's having during a large-scale emergency to keep the communication of upper management of the city and our political leaders informed about what's going on, what we're planning on doing, and getting their input back into ongoing processes. Every year before fire season, we have a meeting with all law enforcement officers in the region and all the fire departments. It's a pre-fire meeting. We talk about evacuations. We meet each other because in the fire service and public safety, you don't want to meet for the first time during an emergency and you're having a conflict. You want to know each other, and that's what we do every year, is we meet just about wildfire, just about evacuations, and how we're going to coordinate changes that may have come down from the state, about how we do surveys of buildings, how we do different evacuation procedures. That's all handled every single year that we meet. Let's see. We also now have, and you guys as City Council have approved our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And as part of that plan, it recognizes looking at egress points of roads to make sure that there's not overgrown brush by them. We actually have had grant money and we have launched our goats on Buenaventura. If you've ever gone through there, it looks a lot better. And because that's part of what the Community Wildfire Protection Plan does, is looks at our risks, evacuation areas, and it identifies areas that we need to mitigate fuels, and that's what we have started to do as a city. Let's see. Something that we use in the field is watch duty. If you want to know about wildfire going on in the community, download that app. Everything's there. They're really, really good at keeping up on sizes of fire, where they're going. It's what we use in the field. It's good data. It's a good place for information. If you really want to know what we know, that's a good place for you to get it. And I think that's my last slide. Thank you.
Oh, now I'm unmuted. And so that was one component of the public comment we got. It's also a major component of our review for the CEQA determination that we're recommending. In addition to that, obviously got a lot of comments about traffic impacts, and as far as CEQA review goes, the traffic studies that we required to make this determination essentially determined that the project would not overload any capacities of any roads. It wouldn't conflict with any general plan transportation program or policy, that there's adequate capacity to serve this project. Average daily trips on roads in the area would not exceed their capacity or level of service. And obviously, we already talked about that the project meets the criteria for emergency access. Those are the criteria that we looked at CEQA, with CEQA. And the general plan EIR also looked at emergency access and determined that there would actually be a significant impact if we were not implementing the road closure mitigation, which is now incorporated in all our projects. And so I just wanted to highlight that. And to go into more detail, because I think it's merited, I was going to invite up Michael Webb, Director of Public Works, to talk more about traffic.
Thank you, David. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. As Planning Manager Schlegel laid out, as part of the project, our design team, specifically our traffic consultant in combination with our traffic engineering team, performed a standard traffic impact analysis of the project. And to be clear, this can be a little bit confusing. There are two separate traffic evaluations, if you will. One that Fire Marshal Summerlin touched on a few moments ago, the evacuation study, that also had traffic elements to that our traffic engineering consultant prepared and we worked closely with through the review process. And then there is what I would call the more typical everyday traffic analysis, which is the traffic impact analysis or traffic impact study that's in front of you right here. So for this study, our traffic consultant looked at the roads there that you see, as well as 9 intersections within the area. And as Planning Manager Schlegel mentioned, each of the roadways within the project study limits are currently operating at below the threshold for traffic that we would like to see, and they are projected to operate below that threshold as well. So for instance, Spinnaker Drive, you kind of see that on the bottom center of the slide. That is classified, or its functional classification, as a local roadway. Typical roadway that we would see in any of our subdivisions, both in width and geometrics. The existing average daily traffic out there right now today is 122 cars. With the project, we're talking about 685, and then in the future, that would be existing, what's there today, plus the project, plus future development that would occur roughly out to the year 2040 based on general zoning all within the area. Spinnaker Drive, we anticipate it to be around 985 trips per day, which is less than half of the number that we like to see there, the capacity for a local roadway of roughly 2,000. You'll see similar Old Lantern just up the road from there. Again, similar, a local roadway. Today, we're seeing around 522 trips per day. Project is fully built, it would jump up to 1661. And in the future, we would be just under the number that we like to see. We'd be at around 1961. And that trend, if you'll notice, exists along Buenaventura, as well as Keswick and Lake. Now, I'll touch briefly on Quartz Hill, being one of the minor arterials out there. Right now, we're seeing, based on most recent counts, roughly 3,800 cars per day. After the project is built, we would anticipate to see that jump up to about 4,900 trips per day. And then roughly in 2040, so again, that's your combination of trips right now today, project added trips, and then added trips in the future from anticipated development, we would expect to see about 6,600 vehicles per day, which is roughly less than half of what we would expect for your everyday traffic capacity of a facility like Quartz Hill, which is approximately 14,000 vehicles. So for comparison purposes, because I know numbers are just numbers and it's easier to put something in front of you that you can wrap your arms around or bite your teeth into, similar facilities around the city like Oasis Road, very similar in number of lanes, geometrics. Right now it's operating at about 6,700 cars per day. And it's well within our general plan guidelines of the level of service C, which is the operation level that we strive for here in the city of Reading. Rancho Road, again, another very similar facility to Quartz Hill. We're seeing roughly 8,200 vehicles per day. Victor Avenue, similar in geometrics and number of lanes. Again, we're seeing about 11,400 vehicles per day. And Airport Road, out on the eastern side of town, we're about 13,500 vehicles per day. And so I just point those out as references because sometimes the numbers can get lost and it's easier to sink your teeth, again, wrap your arms around something that maybe we're using every day to help understand that. And with that, I'm going to toss it back to Planning Manager Schlegel. Thank you.
No.
Did you have a question? I'm sorry. Okay. So yeah, just kind of shifting. Hopefully that was adequate for traffic analysis. If there's more questions, we can go into it further. We did get a comment about preserving blue oak trees on the site. And if you look at the tree survey that was done for the property, a lot of the trees are actually, we had an expanded biological review area when we were looking at road D connection. And so most of the trees were identified in those areas that the project actually isn't impacting. There's one candidate tree identified, and that's over by Quartz Hill Road, not really close to the development of this project. And that's so for our city code, our tree survey, or I'm sorry, our tree management ordinance. There's only one tree that was identified as healthy and worth saving in that regard. Most of the trees, sadly, are laying there, standing there dead from fire. Ultimately, though, if you look at the project impacts, it still would be considered less than significant and that's in the scope of the general plan EIR, which looked at the full build out of our zoning and designations, our general plan designations, and said that we actually would have significant unavoidable impacts to conversion of oak woodland. And that's just something we made a statement of overriding considerations to decide that this is the development the city wanted to do. And so just to point out that this project is in the scope of the general plan EIR, and that's kind of bringing me to my next point, which is the statutory exemption that staff was made aware of. We completed our general plan EIR in 2024. It's a programmatic EIR, and the consultants that helped us prepare that pointed out this case law out of San Diego County, which essentially requires jurisdictions to make sure that we're not duplicating environmental review for projects. If a project's consistent with the general plan and zoning, you just look at whether it's in the scope of the general plan EIR. You look for whether the project has peculiarity that requires further review, whether there's impacts that weren't analyzed by the EIR, or whether there's more significant impacts that the EIR didn't consider. And that's what we did. We prepared, following this statutory exemption section, we prepared an initial study or similar is what how it characterizes that. And just kind of wanted to point that out. We had a consultant help staff prepare that, It was peer-reviewed by planning staff and a third-party consultant. And ultimately, the checklist evaluates all the parameters of that Section 15183 exemption and found that the project's in the scope of the general plan EIR. There's no new impacts that weren't analyzed. There's obviously a lot of studies that support that finding and that recommendation to you. And we also have standard subdivision conditions of approval that we're implementing on all projects that help us get there. And so just kind of wanted to point the CEQA finding, or put the CEQA findings on the slide here to let you know that these were all evaluated with all our studies. And there's no project-specific effects peculiar to this site. There's no specific impacts which the general plan EIR failed to analyze as significant effects. There are no potential significant off-site or cumulative impacts which the general plan EIR failed to evaluate. We do have some significant unavoidable impacts in our general plan EIR, and this project falls within that scope. And there's no new information which results in more severe impacts than anticipated by the general plan EIR. And we also have tentative map approval findings that we are using to make this recommendation. And just kind of wanted to throw those on the screen, and I guess I'll pass it off to Director Jeremy Pagan here to close us out.
Oh, thank you, David. Yeah, so as we wind this presentation down to a close, just wanted to offer a few concluding remarks and then give staff's recommendation to the council. I know there's been a lot of information presented to you tonight. The appellants have written their statements and will likely speak some later. You have hundreds of pages of information in your packets. It's a lot to digest. If I were to attempt to simplify this down, really to get to the heart of the matter, the appellants of this project really have one very significant contention, and that is that the project will substantially impair, in their view, safe evacuation of the area in the event of a wildfire, and that additional road or egress is needed. There are other issues, of course, like we mentioned, daily traffic, biological resources, environmental concerns, but far and away the main concern is regarding wildfire risks, especially evacuation of the area. Therefore, council's decision to approve or deny this project really boils down to the answer to this fundamental question: will the project substantially impair evacuation or not? As you've heard from this presentation tonight, we feel as though we've carefully examined that question and concluded that no, in fact, the project will not substantially impair evacuation. Given how critical the issue is, I just want to give one final summary as to why staff have come to this conclusion, and then we'll close. But before that, I do also want to acknowledge that our communities have been very much impacted by wildfire. We understand and empathize with the trauma and emotions. I myself went through the Carr Fire, lived here. My in-laws were staying at my house for a week because their house burned down in the Carr Fire. So we certainly don't intend to be callous or indifferent to our community's experience with wildfire. It's very real. We've heard, we share in your concerns, and we've spent a lot of effort in reviewing and analyzing this project to gather the best evidence and facts so that we can give our city council the information they need to make an informed decision. But nonetheless, we have an obligation to review this project like we would any other project. When we review a development proposal, our job is to objectively measure it against the goals and policies of the general plan, make sure it meets applicable codes and regulations, and if it does, our job is to recommend approval. And so in reviewing this project and evaluating those wildfire risks, I'm just going to reiterate a few key points. We must not evaluate this project in the context of Carr Fire conditions. The law requires us to evaluate the project based on today's conditions. That's our baseline. Much has changed since the Carr Fire. Quartz Hill Road is not closed. In fact, it's been improved, it's been widened, as was discussed. We have new city policies that require it to remain open during construction. That was a lesson learned from the Carr Fire. Evacuation methods and tools have changed, they've been improved. Genesis Protect, Watch Duty, surveillance cameras help with better early warning and coordination of evacuation. We also have updates to our city's emergency plans. We have the local hazard mitigation plan, the community wildfire protection plan, the emergency operations plan. We have our city's general plan. Lots of plans that make us think hard about what will we do in the event of an emergency. And it's really resulted in better and faster evacuation, as well as improved fire fuels management. And so while I know it's very difficult because our past experience with the Carr Fire, we must put the project in its proper context, which is today. And secondly, the project's potential impact on wildfire evacuation has been carefully examined by staff. We have followed Attorney General guidance for evaluating wildfire impacts. We've completed an evacuation study that's been reviewed by fire, police, engineering, transportation. That study has conservative assumptions. It assumes it's the middle of the night. It assumes everyone's home. It assumes that everyone's pulling a trailer. And it also assumes a couple of wildfire scenarios that are worst case based on our fire officials' input for multiple fire ignition scenarios based on topography, fuel load, and prevailing wind. The study estimates that the project adds about 5 to 7 minutes of additional time to evacuate, which I know seems laughable to a lot of folks in the room who spent hours on those roads that were choked. But it's really important that we remember the 5 to 7 minutes of additional time is not total time. It's the time required, the added time required for the project, nor is it the amount of time to get all the way across town. As Jay Summerland mentioned, it's the time to reach a low-risk zone, a zone where our fire department believes you're safe and your life is not in danger. It may take 1 to 2 hours to get to Market Street or to I-5, and that time certainly will be stressful and scary, as many of you know personally, but your life will be preserved, and that really is the point. Regulations and standards are intended to protect and preserve life, but they cannot completely mitigate the fear, stress, anxiety of experiencing an evacuation. So finally, the project incorporates numerous features that mitigate wildfire risk. We must acknowledge that risk cannot be mitigated to zero. That goes for any natural disaster in the built environment. We do not design buildings for magnitude 10.0 earthquakes. We do not require homes on the river to withstand a 1,000-year flood. Codes and standards mitigate risks down to as low as possible. An 8.0 earthquake, perhaps, a 100-year flood. With wildfire, it's no different. While this project cannot mitigate wildfire risk to zero, it does have features that do greatly reduce the risk. It meets local and state codes for secondary access. State building code for fire resilient construction of homes. We know that the building code is continuing to become more and more cautious on fire and requiring more requirements of our buildings. It has a trail system, a proposed trail system that gives better access for firefighting. It requires vegetation management and fuels reduction through a landscape maintenance district. And finally, it enhances road connectivity in the area and even provides secondary access to neighboring residents, which ultimately helps to achieve CAL FIRE recommendations for that neighborhood. And so for these reasons I've outlined, in addition to all the rationale and evidence provided in our presentation and in your staff report, it is staff's recommendation that the City Council deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of this project. With that, I'll conclude my comments. We have numerous staff here tonight that would be happy and available to answer any questions the council may have.
Okay. I told my wife I wouldn't be home until midnight, so we have about 5.5 hours to fill some time. So we're going to go into public comment. And if anybody does want to speak, I definitely encourage you to speak. You can fill out a card. So if anybody wishes to address this council tonight on any considered item before or during the council's consideration, enter your name in an electronic kiosk. It's located in the lobby back there. The city council is going to allocate up to a maximum of 3 minutes per speaker for each agenda item. And the reminder, all the staff reports, they are available online at the city's website. You can reference them at any given time. They're also in the public view binder located in the podium if you didn't grab one at the north side of the chambers. Okay, so we are going to open up for public comment and start our hearing. So, yep. All right, so we have some speakers. We are going to start with Dawn. After Dawn, it'll go Melvin, and then Charlie. So. Don Farrell. So I didn't see another Don on here, but.
Good evening. My name is Don Farrell. I live on Quartz Hill Road, just on the north side of this proposed project. I retired up here 26 years ago, close to 27, when it was a town. Now I guess it's a city. Anyway, everything that I heard tonight from all these gentlemen, and they put a lot of work into that, there's no doubt about it. Ideal conditions. If the conditions are ideal, you don't lose one road, you don't lose two roads, you don't have a breakdown of vehicles on one road. Everything goes as planned by maybe a consultant from Riverside that put the money in their pocket and told you what you need to do up here. All of these roads that you've marked, what if you had a fire come from the northwest, headed to the southeast through Sulphur Creek, and all them Digger Pines coming on the north side? Now you've lost Kedgwick Road, and then once it jumps over there, I've seen these firemen years ago when the new developments down Stanford Hills was put in. They required sprinkler protections inside in the buildings in certain high hazard areas, or build a fire station on this side of the river. Well, they chose they'd just do sprinklers in certain areas, high hazard, inside these structures. And guess what? Fire didn't come from inside the structure, it came from outside. So what should they have done? Eave sprinklers, roof sprinklers would have been fine. That protects your outside also. Now, if you're going to put a new project in with 120 homes, they have metal roofs. You've eliminated the asphalt roofs. I have seen so many people talking about this Ventura dead ends up there at Stanford Hills and Land Park. It was intended to go across. They just didn't get the funding for it from the federal government. Years ago, they had billions of dollars for infrastructure funding for bridges, and you remember it was back, I think, during Obama, before that. But they didn't apply for it. Now the price of that bridge is so damn much, they'll never be able to put it in. And there's two dead ends, one that goes past the rich guys up there in Stanford Hills, and the one that comes in from Buenaventura off Eureka Way. They was meant to join. It's less than a mile. The bridge would only be 450 feet long. It's a very narrow bridge. Anyway, they need to do a lot more thinking. The ideal situations that the commission has put up is great, but ideal situations don't happen when everybody's panicking. It doesn't happen. They got to get real. Lose two of them roads, now what are you going to do? You've got one road left. Somebody has a breakdown on that road. What's going to happen? Everybody's going to panic. All right, that's all I have to say.
So Don, the question for you, Don, and every speaker today, it could be helpful for a lot of us up here. If you have a specific finding of the reason for the appeal, if you found a finding, that would be great if you can speak
I have
to
ear
that.
problems.
So,
What did you say?
what would help the council today is, with all our public speakers today, is if you have a specific finding for the appeal, if you might be able to state that, that would actually help us navigate through that and navigate through all the public.
You mean a
comments.
finding of how to cure what's wrong?
No, a finding of the appeal itself. So,
I'm not an engineer.
Okay.
We have engineers, but we go outside and pull engineers in and pay them.
okay. All right.
We don't
Thank you,
use
Don.
our engineers.
Okay, thank you, Don. Okay, we have Melvin up next, is that right? Yep. And then Charlie Fitch, you're up next.
Now, the city of Reading finds itself as both the developer and the people that are approving it. I ask you to withdraw your development. And here's why. Even though these public employees try hard, they're not always accurate. And one example you just had up here, your fire chief said that the whole side of Quartz Hill is green and managed, watered. But right after that picture, it's not. It's brush going all the way up to the houses on the bluff, all the way down the hill to the nursing home. And it's unmanaged on the other side as well. Okay, so when inconsistencies like that are told to us, we're told basically not to believe our eyes, not to believe what we see in our own neighborhoods. Now, it did take hours to get down out of the fire area. There is a wider spot that's semi-safe up at the top of Quartz Hill. But you can't put hundreds or thousands of people in that little spot, okay? You can only parking lot so many. I know, because I was one of those people parking lotted in that spot. I parking lot myself next to a fire captain or a fire chief, not sure which one, watched it for a while before I ended up leaving. But it took me a long time to get to the top of the hill, and then it took me over 40 minutes to get from the top of the hill just to the bottom of the hill. And there is brush on both sides. Go drive Quartz Hill. You'll see that he was wrong. People do make mistakes, especially when they're trying to purvey a point of view. Computer models don't get the accurate picture. If people had actually come and talked to the people who evacuated, you would have found out that we were sitting, we'd move, sit for another 5 minutes, move a few more feet, get out, look, see the clear coat melting on the car, and move a little bit more. He also said something else, that it would be faster because it's now paved. It was graded. My Prius C, the smallest Prius made, had no problem on the dirt road. It was the fact that we weren't moving, okay? So that is where the problem is. You have only two roads, Quartz Hill Road and Keswick Road, to evacuate all the people in the area. And Keswick was closed in both directions at one point. And you had one lane on each road for fire people to come in. So at the start of the evacuation, you only had one lane on each road going out. And at the end, all you had was both lanes going down Quartz Hill. If the traffic's not moving, and trust me, that dirt did not slow us down at all.
Melvin, your time is up. I'm sorry. So, thank you for speaking. Charlie, you're up next.
Essentially, you're creating
Noel, you're up after Charlie, and we'll go from there.
Good evening. I'm Charlie Fitch. I'm a retired forester with the U.S. Forest Service. I spent better part of 30 years putting out fires. And one of the things that really scares the heck out of me about this subdivision is the fact that you've got two 250-foot wide power tower corridors right through the middle of this subdivision. We all know that most subdivisions, you take a block of land and you develop it. And like people have said over here, once you have that subdivision constructed, it's a pretty fire-safe zone. But in this particular case, you have some houses, you have a fire corridor, you have houses, you have a fire corridor, and you have more houses. They've talked about doing vegetative manipulation. I talked to the one of the folks at the very first public meeting, and I understand what you're saying here, 50 foot from the structures, et cetera. You're going to do this manipulation. Okay, if you have a house that backs up to that corridor, the house isn't going to be right on the edge of their property line. It's going to be a distance. So assume the house is even at the edge of as far as they can get into the corridor. You still have only treated 100 feet out of a 250-foot wide fuel zone that's going to be brown, dead, volatile all summer long. That's known as hazard. When you put a lot of people around that area, that's known as risk. Risk plus hazard is what makes a wildfire. Higher the risk, higher the hazard, the higher the potential. In my opinion, this plan was talked about as being resilient. Well, I guess you better hope it's resilient because you're going to have a fire in here and somebody's damn well going to get hurt. And I just would not want to see that happen. I suggest you take your fuel treatments and reevaluate them. Because 150-foot wide swath minimum, probably wider than that, of virtually untreated fuel is not going to be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Noel, you're up next. Do you want to speak at the microphone
Yeah.
and then we'll start your time? We'll start your time once. Yes. That's fine.
Hey, good to see you again, all of you. So you asked us to specifically state what I'm going to talk about this. Okay, the first thing I'm going to talk about. Oh,
no.
yes.
Go for it.
Sorry, it was my request, I'm sorry. If you are one of the appellants, I was just, if you could tell us the subject matter for your.
I'm not one of the appellants.
Okay, yeah, then don't even worry about it. So you can go ahead as you planned.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
forgive
appreciate
me.
it. The two main things I want to talk about is the numbers, which I talked about the last time I was here. And the second thing I'm going to talk about is the City of Reading's monies that they're going to receive out of this 114 acre development. This is the City of Reading, okay? Last time I talked about this, when they talk about developments, they talk about a family of 4 and a 2-car household. So a family of 4 brings 480 people into this development. 120 homes, the 2 cars equals 240 cars for this development. Most families have more than 2 cars. When we talked last, they gave us 3 exits to get out for a fire. The emphasis on a fire is, it's gone, okay? The Carr fire was here in 2018. There's no other fire right now. But the idea is that we're emphasizing the fire and how to get out from a fire, when the emphasis should be about how this impacts the neighborhood that has been there for 30 years. 30 years. We had on America, right off a shipwreck, we had a low-income development created there that is a piece of crap. The homes are cheaply made. The yards are, just terrible. And this is, you say 61% has to be below the $101,000. That is median income for Reading. And then you're going to finance $100,000, the City of Reading's going to finance $100,000 of a $400,000 home, which gives you, based on a 6.25% interest rate, a pretty darn good little pot of gold, okay? Secondly, permits. I'm just using $10,000 as a basis for permits to build these homes. That's $1.2 million that the City of Reading gets just for the permits. Then I'm using $1,500 as the property taxes. That brings in another $300,000 to the City of Reading. Now, is that Prop 13 property taxes or the property taxes that you base on the cost of these homes? You don't know. I know that for sure just looking at you. You don't know if Prop 13 is used on this. And I pay 3 bond issues to the Gateway School District and 2 bond issues to Shasta College, which is going to go right on these homes and for these people. And then you said you were going to do
Thank you very much.
I know, a
Your time is
50-year
up.
mortgage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr., how do you pronounce your last name?
My last name?
Yeah.
However you want. Most people say
Oh,
Littell.
that's okay.
But it's Littell.
My first name is Noel. I am famous this time of year as Noel. Thank you.
This is the Christmas time, so.
Can I ask
Christmas, yes.
one question? What was
yes.
what was the neighborhood that you mentioned that looked less than desirable I was taking notes and I forgot to write it.
Okay, could you speak up?
What was the property?
It's in the subdivision, it's on, I think,
What was the subdivision that you mentioned that
On
looked-
Americana Avenue, right off of
Americana, okay.
Shipwreck, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah. Thank you. Please take a drive and see it.
Jack, you're up, Jack Baker. And then Sarah Thomas, you're on deck, so.
Let me get my glasses out here. Well, good evening, Councilman. My name is Jack Baker.
Would you be able to speak a little closer to that microphone so we can hear you?
There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Jack Baker. I'm the developer of Land Park in Stanford Hills. There are adjoining developments. What I want to address is the fact that we've basically got one way in, one way out. I think that transportation, getting out of there is critical. The W-Trans study says it's fine only under controlled conditions. And that's not what you have when you have a fire, like the car fire. It was not controlled as panic, it was smoke. It was really every man for himself. The California Attorney General now tells every city that you must plan for chaos, not calm. And Reading, if you go through the W-Trans study, it conditions its findings on control. Everything has to be controlled, everything has to be organized, police have to be out there, everybody needs to know how they're going. You're going to be evacuated in groups, Group A, then Group B, Group C. That's not how it works. People from Stanford Hills and Land Park were, I'm sure that they were just scared to death. My wife was actually taken out by helicopter. The Quartz Hill Road was not the problem. The intersection between Keswick Dam Road and Quartz Hill was gridlocked. People could not get through there. It was stopped. 2014, the City Council unanimously passed a resolution, 2014-95, requiring the city to develop defensible space along the wildland city interface, 200 and some feet. And they agreed to do it within 1 year in order to qualify for FEMA money. 10 years later, it's still not done. It's not done today. And so we hear all this good stuff about how the city's planning for evacuations, how they're going to, you don't have the trust of the people with, based on the actions that the city have taken in the past. So I have a specific request based on an offer that I made to the city some years ago to give them the necessary property from Buenaventura, the south end, down to Harlan Drive. My wife and I own that piece through there. We said, we'll give you the right-of-way that you need for a road so you can build a evacuation road from Buenaventura down to the south to Harlan Drive. And they chose not to do it. I noticed that the city didn't choose to have the traffic consultant study that either. It was just left out. That's what a specific need. I'm not against the project, but you need to solve the traffic problem out there. You got a safety issue. Excuse me. And you need to get that safety issue addressed before you put a lot more people out there. Why take a bad situation
Jack. Your
and make
time is
it
up.
worse when you can make it better?
Jack, your time is up. I'm sorry.
With the same money. I'm out of time.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we were just out of time. We spent a long time up there waiting for the city.
Jack, thank you very much. Sarah, you're up, so. Are you up, Sarah? Thank you. After Sarah, we'll go to Patrick Archer, and then Nick Gardner.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name's Sarah Thomas, and I am appealing the Planning Commission's October 28th vote that approved the Peaks tentative map for CEQA on the grounds that the proposed subdivision would not be in compliance with Public Resource Code 4290.5, which recommends subdivisions over 30 units to have a secondary egress, as defined at California Code of Regulations 1267.01. The Peaks CEQA traffic study on page 24 states the project would meet the minimum number of access points required under city code and the California Fire Code. However, using Spinnaker as a second egress is not in compliance with Public Resource Code and the California Code of Regulations. Borrowing or doubling up on Spinnaker will negatively impact the safety of all residents, not only in an emergency, but on a daily basis. I understand that the regulations I am citing recommend a second egress, and they do not require it. However, given the Peaks was ground zero for a fire tornado and took the lives of 4 people immediately adjacent to it, and CAL FIRE has already identified egress deficiencies in Land Park, Stanford Hills, River Ridge, and River Park subdivisions, to ignore these regulations is reckless and disrespectful to the citizens of Reading. In order to mitigate this issue, I hope the city will take into consideration the following 3 recommendations. Number 1, construct a secondary egress for the Peaks to Courts Hill Road. I've heard it stated in this chamber that building a second egress for the Peaks will cost too much. But is the cost of an approximately 300-yard road too much if it saves Reading citizen lives? Number 2, install gates across Keel and Steamboat that could be opened if needed during an emergency evacuation. And number 3, aggressively pursue funding for the Buenaventura Bridge that was promised to residents almost 20 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Patrick, you're up. And then after Patrick again, Nick Gardner. So.
Good evening, Council and members of the City of Reading. I live in River Ridge subdivision for 26 years. I live on Landmark Court, which is a small cul-de-sac. We have 12 homes. I've watched the studies that you've done for the traffic, but I don't know if anybody's taken into consideration the Bethel homes. I have a Bethel rental next to me. There were 8 young girls there attending BSSM, which blocked up our entire street all the time. And especially when they have their little gatherings, there was a multitude of over 25 cars on a little tiny cul-de-sac, parked in front of your driveways, parked in front of the fire hydrants. So I'm wondering if they've ever taken into consideration the Bethel homes that could go into these new Peaks division. How many more people is that going to bring in? They're counting on 2. I had 8 cars next door. So I want to know, have they factored in any of that? Because they've spread out all through the city. They're everywhere in every track. That's their goal. But I want to know the safety of how they're going to calculate these homes that they're renting out like this all the time. And again, we were promised 26 years ago a bridge across Buenaventura. And yes, we almost died. Thankfully, the person sitting out here was the engineer for the Courts Hill remodel, Ron DeMag, my neighbor for 20-some years. The day of the fire, I asked him, how are we going to get out of here with Courts Hill being closed? Because that was his project. He said, I thought of it. He said, I had him scrape a road on the side so we could smooth it and we'd be able to get out if we have to. Well, we did. And it was all backed up until I got there and the sheriff was there and I said, move the barrier. There's a temporary road we can get down, which he did. And I was the first one to go down this rough little road, but we got out. But when we got down to the bottom, Lake Reading Park is on fire and they're trying to get out. Every road was completely clogged up. So when you take into consideration 8 people living in one house and all that traffic, was that calculated into that? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, you're up. After Nick, we'll go Cheryl and Rich. Sure.
The reason we have government is to provide safety and infrastructure we can't provide for ourselves. I don't feel safe around Reading, and our infrastructure is going to hell. I think you should get that house in order before you start worrying about going into the land development business and constructing homes.
My name is Cheryl Bullock. Tonight, the question that I want to ask you is there anyone out there with the courage to do what is right in the design of this subdivision? A longtime Reading resident said to me, here's how the city works. They do what they want, and that if it doesn't turn out well, the response is, oh, I'm sorry, it's too late. There's nothing we can do about it now. I can honestly say after 2 years that this is the road we are on right now with the city. I have indeed heard those words, sorry, it's too late to change the plan. And before that, for months I heard, oh, there's plenty of time for your input. Don't get worried about this. There's plenty of time. Now suddenly, we're out of time. Planners, you say you've checked all the boxes and everything lines up well. Well, the act of checking the boxes alone in decision-making is a hollow exercise in procedural compliance, falsely equating the presence of a process with the guarantee of a sound outcome. Think Space Shuttle Challenger here. CAL FIRE recommendations have been dismissed. Citizens' experiences have been dismissed. We know our first responder teams will likely be functioning with fewer members in the near future. Who will end up paying the price for these one-sided decisions? Jeremy Stoke, our firefighter whose life was cut short, his wife and children get up every day to life without him. This costly loss should cause our city leadership to change how they plan and lead going forward. This week, Jeremy Pagan told Shasta Scout in an interview that residents could choose to sue the city regarding the upcoming CEQA report. Let me ask you, city staff and council, is this leading well? Is this the best you can do for yourself, for the residents, and for your own city? You could be so much more. You could take the high road. We shouldn't even be here tonight. With collaboration, these issues could have been resolved months ago. It is not too late to make changes. You do have the time, and you are out of excuses. So is there anyone out there with the courage to do what is right tonight? That's the question. Please overturn this plan.
Thank you, Cheryl. Rich, you're up. After Rich, Dave Law and David Ledger.
I'm Rich Bullock. I live on Spinnaker Drive with Cheryl. And my appeal is on a personal basis, and that is that the design of this project that's been going on for quite some time, I think we're on at least the 3rd map that shows the plot outlines, and at least one of the previous ones had no homes right bumped up against our back fence. And that goes back to what I think was Charlie that spoke on the fact that this is pushed up against Spinnaker Drive, all the way up and down. And we have seen what great planning has been done with these new homes, with fire safety, with the front porch mentality, the park, the encouragement of people to gather in areas and so on, and have a community basis there. And about 80 of the homes in this new development all have open space around them. And yet the plan pushes it against Spinnaker Drive and takes away that open space from the residents that have been there for anywhere from 15 to 18 years. And I think that's just a poor choice. If you're going to take the effort to plan a new development and have the homes back up to open space, don't take it away from the existing people just so you can squeeze in your 120 lots. And I was at the downtown market yesterday. It's a beautiful, beautiful development that K2 did. And they've also got this plan. If they can pull off that downtown market and make it look that spectacular, and it really is, they can move a couple homes in that map because they had them someplace before, but now they're bumping right up against Spinnaker Drive. And I just think that's a poor message to the existing residents who have spent time taking care of that property. And now suddenly that's taken away in an effort to give that same ability to the new design ability to the new homes that are going in. So I would suggest moving those homes that are pressing right against Spinnaker Drive and fixing the plan while there's still time. Thank you.
Mayor, council staff, my name is Dave Law. I've been a resident of River Ridge Terrace for 32 years now. I was also a firefighter for the City of Reading Fire Department for 32 years. And at the time of the car fire, I was retired. I had a hard time sitting here tonight listening to Deputy Chief Sutherland talking about the EOC and things like that. And I can tell you, the EOC wasn't even activated during the car fire. The biggest disaster in the city of Reading, they trained the EOC personnel. Where were they? Why wasn't it activated? Car fire was 7 years ago. We had the Fawn fire coming into the Terra Oaks area. It was the EOC. It was roaring in there, coming down. Was the EOC activated? Absolutely not. So I think a lot of that is lip service. You know, we're doing this, we're doing that. I'd like to see the training records. I'd like to see Chief Sutherland's, you know, what his I don't have the word right now, but his documentation is to be a fire marshal. I mean, any fire chief or fire marshal that okays this project, I mean, they aren't firemen. They aren't, because you're talking about people's lives. And that's the biggest thing, is the egress, in and out. I was there, I stayed. And I was ready to leave, but my 32 years of experience, I can tell when to leave and when not to leave, and was able to save my home and several other homes there. But that's the biggest thing. People's lives, you can't replace them. And I'm not against development. I want to see it done right. That's all we're asking. We want it done right so these people can live in comfort. And your budget situation, I hate to say it, but I think you're going to go back down to 2 people on an engine. Because, you know, I've been looking at things, and you got people leaving your department, fire department, and because they know they're going to be on the chopping block. So I would like you to take into consideration, you have the chance to change this. Like Nike says, just do the right thing. Just do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave. After David, we'll go to Todd and Marla. David, you're up, yeah. Yeah.
Good evening, council members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today, and I want to congratulate Mayor Latav for being elected mayor. I'm representing today California Native Plant Society, the Shasta chapter, and then Sierra Club, the Shasta group of Sierra Club. I'm going to focus on the botanical. The California Environmental Quality Act was enacted. It was kind of a landmark legislation to protect our environment and also to allow public input into environmental issues when projects come up. And so my concerns around this environmental protection, the California Environmental Quality Act, is their biological surveys, and I find this on a lot of Reading projects, is there are certain protocols that are required by CEQA through California Department of Fish and Wildlife protocols that they have to follow when they do these biological surveys. And one thing they're supposed to do is identify all of the species of plants that are on a project. They did not do this on this one. They did not even come close. There were like 2 willows, a cottonwood tree, an alder tree that they did not even identify. And then there were some rare or protected plants that grow in wetland areas. So when did they do the plant survey, even though this project's been going on for about 5 years, 23 at least anyway? They had them do it in September and October. And the biologists, which you can see in my letter that I wrote, they admitted that because it was past the blooming period and all the plants were brown, they could not be identified. So the planning department response is, well, we'll do that before construction. Now, where's the public input? Because they're going to send over what I call blind botanists that are going there. There may not be any protected plants in there, but they're going to go in there and they're not going to find anything. Because if they do, it could cause some mitigation required for this project. So that's my number one problem with this, is it should not be approved when you're not following the CDFW protocols for plant identifications. And so that's the number one thing I have with this. There's other ones, they didn't survey all of the plants. For some reason, they stayed away from the wetlands. So they're not following the Environmental Quality Act. And that said, I want to make a quick statement about what people said about the wildfire issues. That's another issue. There's an area where I hike a lot. I've worked with BLM on this and tried to get them to not cut down too much brush, and they did, but everything came up, even where they did intensive brush clearing and where they did less that I requested, everything came up, and it's like almost like it was before the fire. So that's something that could happen. Thank you.
Mr. Ledger, can I ask a question?
David, there's a question up here for you. No, don't be sorry.
You said that those studies were done in September and October. Do you have a suggestion of when it would have been a good time to do those studies?
Yes, well, in the CDFW guidelines, they're required to do them in the blooming period, and it's particular during the blooming period of the rare plants, because you can't hit every blooming period, but they're supposed to go back 3 or 4 times. They went twice, but it was past the blooming period. The same with Patrick Jones gun range out there. The biologist for that did it in January and February, and then county sent him back out there again. And he did it in the end of May after there'd been no rain for 29 days. And he admitted all the plants were dead. I couldn't identify them. And that was one of the reasons why it was rejected. Well, the landowners in the area won the case, and the project can't go forward at this time anyway.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Todd, you're up. And then after Todd, Marla. And then after Marla, Rodney, if you're out there.
Good evening, Council. My name is Todd Buck, and I am a teacher out at Foothill High School
and have lived in Reading all my life. I moved up to River Ridge in 1998, and I was the only house built on Yacht Court before the foreclosures happened. That's the neighborhood Noel was talking about that was undeveloped till after the Carr fire. I was the one house known as the lone house, the first picture after the Carr fire taken above us off of the cul-de-sac that showed the only house in the subdivision that was there was down. My biggest appeal is we had an emergency plan prior to the Carr fire. And the city had, what we should do in case we have a fire, in case we have an earthquake or the dam breaking. The city didn't uphold their part of the bargain by maintaining that fire break, the natural fire break above on the west side of our subdivision. So that's my appeal. I'm going to stay somewhat short, but there's some things that were brought up tonight that remind me, some of those pictures that were shown, they are nice pictures and they show Quartz Hill Road in its best time and its worst time. Going down the hill was bedlam. It was crazy. What we endured was not just people coming up and down the hill, and in that safety zone were people down there parked next to the Diesel Horse Bridge taking pictures. It was like a parking lot down there, people outside their car holding up their phone, taking videos and pictures. I don't necessarily agree that even though the fire's not on top of us, the hillsides were dry. They're dry right now. That's true. On top of Quartz Hill, I appealed to the city within the last 2 months. If you drive up on top where the vistas are, there's no lines on the road. There's no lines on Quartz Hill Road. I asked, can they be painted? When you're going down that road, we have the barrier on the west side that keeps the people from watching the fireworks seasonally, but we do not have lines up there or a guardrail going down the hill. So if safety's our utmost important, we need to do our job, or your job.
All right, thank you. And then Marla, you're up, and then Rodney.
Good evening. I did not intend on talking tonight when I came in at all. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I did not intend on talking at all. I'm from the South originally, so I've been through hurricanes and tornadoes, but I've never run from a firenado before. My brother-in-law was a chief of Orlando Fire Department, so I'm used to firemen in my family. And my sons have fought forest fires. I was prepared for this fire. When ashes started falling in the pools in my neighborhood, I started packing. I was one of the few in my neighborhood in River Ridge that did pack. And I was prepared and started packing my car and my husband's truck. I have to disagree. I did not go over power lines when I ran, when my husband and I drove out of there. My neighbors, I'm sorry, I'm a little upset over this, so I apologize, kind of reliving this a little bit, as I'm sure some of my neighbors in here are rethinking that day. But I don't know how many of you actually lived in that neighborhood, but running from that was really scary. And I know my neighbors are reliving that right now, a lot of them, and some of them who passed away in that. So a lot of you who are sitting here in these chairs weren't the ones that were running away and weren't the ones that were dying. And your neighbors weren't scared coming back, and you didn't lose your neighbors. And like the gentleman that stood there and that spoke a little while ago, you weren't the ones with the hose fighting and talking to your neighbors afterwards. And I'm still shaking thinking about it right now and remembering how I was watching my neighbors pick up their lost pieces and people coming in. You weren't the ones, you guys. You weren't the ones that went through this and was scared running from a fire tornado. So please, please listen to these people, because you don't want to be the ones running from this again and going through this. You don't want to be the ones. And when you build that park down there with those kids, you don't want those kids running from this. You don't want to be the ones. So please listen to us. And you don't want to be the ones out there without a bridge and another road to cross over that should have been there. It should have been built. We were promised that. And the city did not build it. So please listen. I beg you.
Thank you, Marla. All right, Rodney, you're up.
Good evening. I just want to add my 2 cents to this. I live in Land Park. My house was burnt to the ground. I was at work that day. It was across the river. Who expected a fire to race across the river in 30 seconds? Actually, 30 minutes. I experienced it. I took off as soon as that thing crossed the river, and we could not get out of there. I was literally where Jeremy Stokes died 1.5 minutes before he died there. The flames were coming across the road. I turned my windshield wipers on to get rid of the embers. We ended up on Courts Hill, and it was pandemonium, as somebody pointed out earlier, just pure pandemonium. And there's nothing I heard tonight that explains how you get more egress by using Spinnaker. Nothing. The bottlenecks were Courts Hill and Keswick Dam Road. They're not making any of those bigger. So my feeling is it's an egress problem, and it's BS.
Okay, with no more speakers, we're going to close the public hearing. This is our opportunity to go to. Oh, What was your name, sir? Okay. Yeah, go to the microphone. You're good. So, no. Sir, we need to have you speak to the microphone, so, okay, yeah, okay. Oh, got it.
Before my time starts, you want me to explain what I was saying about the box and the documents? Anyway, I was advised by the city attorney to provide 10 copies of whatever I wanted to submit, which is what I've done. And you asked about an outline of what we were going to discuss. Item 1 is going to be information that the staff left out that I think should have been included. Number 2 is the south evacuation routes. Number 3 is the W-Trans and Attorney General reports. And if there's time, and there probably won't be, the points of access issue. My name's Leonard Bandel, and
Leonard, can I ask a question?
Sure.
If you wanted more than 3 minutes, how much time would you like?
I didn't, I timed it to try and get it to 3 minutes, so I don't know how much time it would take if I put a bunch of stuff in the letter because I knew I was going to be limited on time, but.
My wife doesn't think I'm home till midnight, so we got time, so.
Well,
I know,
let's
I
say
just,
I think I can get all of this done in 5 minutes.
yeah, okay, sure. That sounds great.
Number one, I think this is kind of a fait accompli. The city is the developer. You've already spent $3.5 million of the grant money. I can't see how you can go back on that. I understand it's tough to be objective, but I think, and the council will do the best it can to be objective, but I know there's a push from staff and other forces to make this project happen. And I don't think you've heard any objections to the project, just about how it's being done. I've represented Mr. Baker when I was in private practice. I had to quit for years for health, and I've been working for him in his office for the last 20 years. I'd like to talk first about the south egress issues. In the year 2020, Jack offered the city, and in fact, if you could, would you look at tab 4? If you have that handy, you'll see what he was talking about the connection to Harlan Drive. It would connect Buenaventura to Lake Redding Estates. Because my time's going, oh, I was given 5 minutes, great. So in 2020, Jack offered that connection. It didn't show lots on it at that time. And by email of June 15, 2020, which I've provided in the packet, Larry Voppel said, we're just not interested. The city's not interested. In January of this year, we were contacted by the then city attorney and the current then city manager and the current city manager to come meet and talk about the Peaks project. We met, and the purpose from their point of view was Jack holds 2 easements across the Peaks property. The city wanted him to abandon those easements. They're held in the name of creative living. Jack said he was willing to consider that, but his biggest concern was fire egress. And until we saw the traffic report and what mitigations were going to be offered for fire egress, he didn't want to talk about abandoning the easement. So we've been waiting for the traffic report and the initial study. I think David Schlegel could confirm. I was calling him or emailing him regularly. Where's the traffic report? Where's the report? It was delayed. It was delayed again. And at this meeting in January, we were told that the Peaks project would enhance Jack's development of the property to the south, which is the Alizé property, because they're going to put in a crossing of a water course. Again, Jack was not concerned about that enhancement over and above getting something to benefit the entire area. And Jack had suggested putting the road in, as shown in tab 4, and said that he would pay for the construction of that road and bringing a water line down that road if the city could include 9 lots on the road as part of it. But if that was not doable, the 9 lots, he'd be willing to still give the easement, provided the city paid to improve the road down to Harlan Drive. So that was what we were waiting for. In August of this year, I was again contacted, this time by Mark Christ, I think from your housing department, and David Schlegel about having another meeting about the Peaks project. That was fine. We met with them, and they were again asking, are you going to abandon the easements? And we said, we still haven't seen the traffic report. We haven't seen any mitigations. And what happened with our offer on Harlan Drive? The meeting adjourned. The next day I received an email. The email said, well, the city really wasn't really going to accept or include anything having to do with Harlan Drive as part of this project, which kind of floored us because we've been waiting to hear a response to that. So Harlan Drive's offered, and that would provide an egress. Now, the other issue is the Buenaventura Bridge. I think that's been on the city general plan for like 40 years. And I had made a public records request to find out what the city had submitted but to seek a grant to put in the Buenaventura Bridge. All I was provided with is what is given to you in tab 3. I'm not suggesting you look at it now. And in fact, my bottom line here is going to be to ask that you take the time after this meeting and decide which of any of these points that are raised by the people here or in my letter need to be responded to. All right, that's 5 minutes.
And no, you can keep going.
All right. So we think the council deserves to have some additional answers. I guess the initial issue was, nowhere in your staff report does it tell you that when the first motion was made at the Planning Commission to approve the project, it was defeated. It went down on a 2-1 vote. The staff report says, oh, it was unanimously approved, but they don't tell you this thing was really voted down at first by the Planning Commission. Any event, we got the documents we got on the Buenaventura grant application showed that the city applied for a $120 million grant for a 1,600-foot reinforced box girder bridge and 1 mile of paving. We've calculated, our company's done a lot of road building over the years, and we calculated looking at the cost of the bridge at the end of Court Street, the one that parallels Diesel Horse, which cost around $9 million to finish in '96, and used the Caltrans estimator. And that figure comes forward to a figure of about $22 million. We also built the mile of Buenaventura Road that dead ends, and that was at a cost of $700,000 when it was built, and would now cost around $2 million. So what we're saying is we think that the city, the Buenaventura Bridge and the road could be built for about $24 million. So why does the city apply for a $120 million grant and provides no supporting documentation when it submitted its grant? On the grant application, it says provide estimates from a qualified professional, and it notes that providing that estimate is optional. I asked for a records request for what was submitted, and I got nothing that showed an estimate. So I think you're entitled to some answers on what happened there. What happened with that application for grant money? Then, how did staff determine that a 1,600-foot bridge was needed when the bridge, the Court Street Bridge, is around 500 feet? We checked that we scaled using Google Earth the crossing of the Sacramento River. The crossing of the Sacramento River at the two logical places to cross it to bring Buenaventura across the road would be less than 200 feet of river span. In other words, 40% of what the Court Street Bridge was. So again, why do you submit a request for a grant for a 1,600-foot bridge? That would trouble me if I was sitting on the council. This project, if the council approves it, is going to stand or fall, if anybody takes this on the adequacy of the W-Trans Peaks Evacuation Assessment. If you read the first 3 paragraphs of that report, and I've taken them apart in my letter to you, you cannot come away from that saying, this is a proper answer of this issue. And you keep hearing about the Attorney General's report. Well, yes, and that report, the W-Trans report, cites the Attorney General's report. But in the 675-page staff report you were given, why were you not given a copy of the Attorney General's advice on this? And I would suggest if you read the Attorney General's advice, which is in the package, and compare it to the W-Trans, you're going to come away with a bunch of questions on whether that report, the evacuation report, is truly adequate.
Okay, sir, I think we're past the 5 minutes, but
Okay.
I really enjoyed the information.
I didn't quite finish, but I think you get the gist of it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you
So,
for this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I may be off subject, but I mean, I'm kind of curious if there is someone that thinks they can build the bridge for 25 million, I'm unfamiliar, what is the process? Could they just submit a proposal, or is that, I mean, that sounds amazing, so.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a letter of interest submitted to the city of Reading, and then we would work with our Public Works Department to analyze that offer.
Yeah, I would note if the city were paying for it, it would have to go through a public bidding process. So there are some steps that would have to be taken there, but I certainly think it wouldn't hurt to hear any information about any such proposal.
It sounds like it could be something that we could use for a future application as guidance, as that gives us the playbook of how to get it done, right?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
We could. And we had a Public Works engineer provide the estimate for that application. The application was very simple. These are emergency funds. They didn't require a lot just to get the application in, but it was denied.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. There's a time for comments, questions. We have Councilor Resner, I see you up first, so we'll go to you.
Actually, just to clarify procedurally, Mr. Mayor, I believe that Mr. Bendel's statement was part of the public hearing as well. So just to clarify, if you're closing it now at this time.
Yes, we will close the hearing there, so. All right, Council Resner, you're up.
I am going to do something different than I was originally thinking, mostly because I really enjoy data and I would like to thoroughly read through this document that we were just given. So I'm going to before I make a decision, so that I am making a decision with all of the knowledge that I can. So I'm going to make a motion to continue the item. I understand that that extends frustration for all parties on all sides and makes things more complicated, but it really matters to me that I have all of the information that I possibly can have. I also would like to just share, because I've seen that there are comments online that we didn't live through Carr Fire, and so we don't know what that felt like. And I just want to let you know that I evacuated Carr Fire with a baby and a toddler, and my toddler we had to find a different route once we had moved back in. We evacuated 3 different times that summer, and it was such an emotional stress on my toddler at that time that we had to find a different way to enter into our house because he started having nightmares, and it was really upsetting. So I just want to communicate that some of us do understand what it is like to try and put the things that matter to you in what you can and get out the door. I've lived through the Jones Valley Fire and the Carr Fire, so I had a little bit of extra time, and because I had littles, I left early. But we lost 17 or 18 homes in my neighborhood, and I drove past that every day. I do know what it's like to be out there with my neighbors and shuffle through what they can find. I do know what it's like to look at damage and depressed scenes on a regular basis. So I just want to say that when I am making a decision, it is why I want to have all of the facts in front of me, because I do understand the emotional trauma that our entire community lived during that time frame. And I want to make wise developmental decisions. So that's why I'm making a motion to continue so I can read this document.
Follow-up question, has this document been emailed to us yet, or have we received
No,
this?
I had encouraged Mr. Bendel to try and submit the document in advance so that there would be time to read it. This is the first time I'm seeing of it, so if you do want to continue to provide time, you can do that. It does not require you to reopen the public hearing. You can just review the materials in front of you and then come back at a later date.
Okay, yeah, I think I recall seeing that email where we did request the suggestion to send that if it was going to be more than 3 minutes or 5 minutes or so. Councilor Resner, just a question. We received this document, at the last minute here, but if we continue this hearing to another hearing and somebody else submits a document like this too, that can continue to delay hearings and that can just keep going like that. So that would be one concern, is that we set a precedence that we can take this hearing, to the future, and somebody else can submit a document like this too. But that would just be my feedback there, so.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, you also have the option, if you want to take a 15, 20-minute recess to take some time to review.
Meanwhile, when you decide these things, can I ask
Go
questions?
for it, yeah.
Someone has, Janessa, you want to go first?
Before that, I'm sorry, I tried to take turns, I think. I ignored, Councilor Munns was up there, and then we'll go to you. Is that okay? Thank you.
Oh, that's all right, no worries. Mr. Webb, can you step up just for a second? Just one quick question. I just have 2 questions, one for you and one for Mr. Pagan. Is my understanding through our meetings that these current subdivisions, the roads were built for future housing?
That is correct.
And can you explain that a little bit for me?
Yeah, as development projects proceed around town, Director Pagan's department, as well as mine, work through the entitlement and conditioning process to make sure that subdivisions are ultimately built so that as future phases come in, that we have connectivity. It's really a positive thing, as I believe Manager Schlegel, as well as Fire Marshal Summerlin laid out, because it gives residents within those subdivisions options on how to get out daily as well as during emergency evacuations.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pagan, I think during our conversations, we talked about these lots 78 and 77 for sure, but there was some setbacks within the property that were not buildable, that created a buffer between the houses behind. Even though the property lines connect, there was, I think it was like 20 or 25 feet or whatever it was, that there was no building for this property. Even though they owned the property, they couldn't build on it.
Yeah, there's an elevation change between those parcels. It's hard to say at this point what at final build out that elevation change will be. I think the plans show roughly 10 to 12 feet in elevation change between those parcels. Also, if finished grade, the pad, we don't exactly know those dimensions at this juncture, but at slopes exceeding 20%, it renders it non-buildable. We can't really guarantee anything other than what the zoning code says for a setback.
Mhm.
And so a rear yard setback is generally a 15-foot setback to the rear property line. And so you are guaranteed that per se because that is codified. Likely with the slopes of that lot, it would be more than 15 feet, but I can't say that for certain at this hearing.
I'm pretty
But
sure we talked about a bigger gap.
You could add potentially easements or other mechanisms on the map to guarantee that this is a no-build zone. Likely, it wouldn't be buildable because of slopes like you're mentioning.
All right.
But I don't feel comfortable saying that for certain, but you could lock that down with an easement on the parcel.
Thank you.
So, the day of Car Fire, I was visiting my daughter in New York, and my wife with 2 little kids and 2 dogs was running in the middle of night because sort of houses were burning around us. So, having lived through that terrible experience that I was not even here to protect them or to help them at all was just horrible. So, I just want you to know that this is my perspective, this is the lens I'm looking at, through which I'm looking at this project. And it's a difficult decision because we have need of housing. We also want to promote developments, but at the same time, we want to make sure it's safe. So I have a few specific questions for the staff, actually. So the first question is what Nick brought up very wisely, that why are we in the business of development rather than focusing on infrastructure? And I know partly because we are just developing the infrastructure here, and later on some developer may come and develop these lots furthermore. So I do find a little bit concerned with that kind of creates these kind of situations when we are developer as well as an approving authority, and that does bring some kind of conflict of interest in that. But at the same time, this has been going on for several years, and we're kind of far ahead into that process. I have been on the council for 1 year, but this process has been going on for at least 3-4 years. So my first question is, just hypothetically, not saying that which way we are going, if this project doesn't move forward, what is the money city's on hook for in terms of returning the grants? How much money we'll have to return?
It would be about $3.5 million is what we would have to return. So I anticipate we would sell the property to a private developer for them, so we could get the market rate out of the property and then pay the grant back.
And why was that? I'm just wondering, what was the reason that city chose to develop it itself rather than selling it to a private party in first place?
The grant funding is limited to the city owning the property and the city having the ability to create the infrastructure. After that, once you're done with that portion of the CDBG funds, then it'll go to private development. So we're just trying to get it to the private side.
Okay.
It's very similar to what we used to do in redevelopment. We
Okay.
had property, we would stimulate the development for, to create opportunities for housing.
So if this project doesn't move forward, we are have a risk of 3.5 million, but also signaling the other developers that this kind of issues can make it very difficult for any future housing project development. So I see those risks. Second question I have is for the bridge on Buenaventura. So, I think most of the people here know that I'm a big advocate of that. I've talked with a lot of you, and actually I went to the City of California League, and I talked with several people to see how we can figure out how to develop this. Michael, Mr. Webb, could you just tell us, you worked with Caltran and you are our current Public Works Director. What is is that $120 million too high? Or is this something, as the previous speaker said, or do you think it's really doable for 24 million, as he said, or is there somewhere in between? What's your sense?
My sense on that is that it really depends on where the bridge is ultimately located. If we look at the locations that, and I apologize that Mr. Bendel described, the terrain directly adjacent to the river is very flat, and it's easier to construct a bridge there because you can construct it essentially to the width of the river. The location in which they're talking about has pretty steep bluffs on both sides of the river and would require either a longer structure, which is I'm assuming is why staff at this time or at the time looked at a longer structure, or a shorter structure with extensive roadway construction to come down the steep slopes. So you're looking at probably combinations of retaining walls and very expensive roadway construction to get down to a level to have a shorter bridge. My gut tells me that there's likely a sweet spot in there where it makes sense, but you still have to get from Buenaventura up on the peak on the north side down to the river elevation, and that is very expensive construction. The portion of Buenaventura that was constructed as part of that project was relatively flat, so it's not a great apples and apples comparison. My gut tells me that it's probably somewhere between those two numbers. I would be ecstatic to build a bridge for $24 million.
Me too.
If that was the reality.
Yes.
My gut tells me that that's not a reality today.
But you think there is a sweet spot somewhere between that it doesn't have to be 120, or I understand you're just a guess. I'm not asking you to
Yes.
put your number on that.
And another thing to point out, very likely back when those studies were performed to look at the costs of bridges, environmental regulation has grown considerably.
Especially in California.
Yes, and so work in the channel, in the floodplain is very expensive and very time-consuming and very challenging.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So those are the kind of concerns which I see are kind of, we are always trying to, this is a decision which we are all trying to make in the best interest of the public, because you are neighbors too. We live here, we work here, and I would love to see eventually Buenaventura Bridge. And I can tell you that I'm going to make sure that we work very hard to achieve that result. Not going to happen tomorrow, but I definitely will work hard to achieve that. But those are the two of my questions, but I'm actually just want to stop there and say.
Okay, yeah, we'll come back to you. I'm sure you can think of more. Got a couple questions. Going through my list here. This may be overlapping. I know there was a lot of information earlier, but just confirming the traffic impact study, that was an independent third party. Is that correct? So, yeah.
The traffic impact study or the evacuation study?
Yes. So.
Both?
Well, you can address that, so.
I'll have Director Webb make sure I don't make a mistake. He knows them more intimately than I do.
Yeah.
Yes, both of those documents were prepared by W-Trans, a consultant to us through the Housing Department.
Okay. I know we can't guarantee that only 6.9 minutes will be added to the egress time in a worst-case scenario. Is that the max that we would allow? I mean, is there wiggle room for more minutes? So we can't guarantee that 6 minutes, 6.9 minutes added, but how confident do we feel that that won't add, significant more time? So,
I think Director Pagan captured it very wisely in his summary of the presentation. Through the development of this project, the city traffic and engineering team worked pretty extensively with W-Trans on a number of the assumptions and how to really prepare and model that evacuation assessment from a traffic perspective. Those are not documents that have been readily prepared, and it really is an emerging field, if you will, within the field of traffic engineering. And then also given the sensitivity of the location, we went back and forth with W-Trans a number of times on the assumptions, particularly the average speed, particularly the length of the vehicle, as well as the number of vehicles leaving. And we feel like we landed in a spot that was very reasonable with assumptions that made sense. We looked at also two pretty large aggressive fires, one coming from the northeasterly direction and then a second coming from the southwesterly direction. And I believe the southwesterly direction is a similar path to what we experienced with the Carr fire. So from our perspective, we feel like the report did a good job analyzing what evacuation would look like. And I would also remind council that the project is, and Director Pagan may need to chime in here and make sure I don't misstep, but the project really needs to evaluate its impact, not necessarily the baseline that is there. And that's why the report focused on the additional amount of time required to evacuate that area as opposed to the entire amount of time it would take to get out of there. And I think that's an important distinction to make because through the entitlement process, we don't have the ability to condition developments to do more or to mitigate for more than their project does or has impact to, excuse me.
Yeah, and I might add just a nuance to that is the Attorney General's document is guidance. It's not law. It's meant for CEQA practitioners and meant to help guide us when we're trying to do a CEQA analysis on what is a very new and emerging field in CEQA, which is wildfire analysis. And so throughout that whole document, you have words like should, encourage, try. It's not very declarative in a lot of ways, and certainly we can talk more about it. Definitely not an intentional omission out of your packet. We had 700 pages already given to you, so we didn't feel as though it didn't make the list, but that guidance document talks about, to your point, Mr. Mayor, which is what is the threshold? How many minutes is the correct amount of minutes? And the guidance says that cities are encouraged to find what that threshold is. Now, in our research and looking around, we don't know of a single city in California that has that threshold defined to the minute. So what we have to do in the absence of that exact minute is we have to gather all the evidence and data we can. We have to commission a study that we feel is reasonable, based on good assumptions, passes muster with our technical team. And then we have to ask our fire personnel and our police personnel and our city engineer, does this exceed a threshold of significance for you in your best professional judgment? And when we took that to them, they said, for all the reasons we've already heard tonight, no, we don't feel as though it exceeds that threshold. So the city of Reading doesn't have a minute. It's pretty difficult to do because largely, if we were in another area of town, that minute would probably be different. It'd probably be a different number based on the roads surrounding the property and other conditions. I don't know that we'll ever come up with what that exact minute threshold is. We are, importantly, commissioning a citywide evacuation study as we speak, because our general plan tells us to do that. We're hopeful it will arm us with more information for the future, but right now, the best we can do is what we've delivered to you tonight, which is that threshold isn't defined. We can analyze it and then go, do we feel comfortable with this or not, based on our best professional judgment.
Yeah. All right.
If I can,
Yeah.
I was just hoping to add to that. I think what you received just now from Mr. Bandel is similar. Sorry, I was about to use a double negative to comments we got from Jack Baker previously, and it's highlighting language in the W-Trans evacuation study that essentially tries to say what Jeremy just said. It's saying the intention of this evacuation study is that the traffic engineers are giving information to the person who ultimately makes the decision and arming the decision maker to be more informed about how the project would impact their emergency operations plan. And so at the end of all that, at the end of this evacuation study, what the Attorney General guidance says is it falls on the shoulders of those emergency operations authorities. And that's what this study was trying to do. That's what that paragraph is called out in item number 1 in Mr. Bandel's letter is trying just to say, basically. I just want to add to that.
Okay, thank you. When I think about the park, I think about shelter in place, viability. It may not be required, but could we give consideration to making the proposed park site more viable as a temporary shelter in place location? If there was an emergency just beyond, say, vegetation management, are we considering any kind of design adjustments, that could help meet that capability? Or I don't think the park design has been developed yet, so no.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, it may be important, just for the purposes of this meeting, to clarify whether you're asking because that's relevant to the environmental analysis, or whether as the project proponent, that's something that you would like staff to look at later on.
Yeah, it's probably just more a comment, more than anything, so I'd love staff to look at that in the future. And, sorry, got one more question, then I'll move on to you guys. We've heard about the tree removal, that there's, with the blue oaks, maybe only one tree that can be preserved. Not entirely up to speed, but maybe you could briefly help me understand the specific methodology for determining which trees were either small, in bad health, or had died. Any feedback to that? So.
Just generally, our methodology of our tree management ordinance requires a tree survey to be completed. So all trees over 6 inches diameter at breast height are considered protected trees in the city of Reading. And so a survey is conducted to identify trees that meet that criteria. Then our tree management ordinance requires that those trees be graded on their health. And so an arborist or a biologist or someone with the requisite experience and education and training will evaluate all those trees that meet that criteria to tell us which ones are healthy and which ones are called so-called candidate trees. Your tree ordinance calls them candidate trees. If we identify which ones are candidates for preservation, then it's up to us to determine with that developer, okay, which ones are worth saving, which ones are not, based on their health. And so you kind of whittle through the process and narrow it down more. A lot of times with tree preservation, it's very difficult because you have a lot of competing regulations on a site, whether it's infrastructure, roads, grading, wetlands, riparian habitat, so on and so forth. So you narrow it down to candidate trees, and then of those, you save the ones that you can. Our tree management ordinance doesn't have anything declarative like thou shalt. It's basically saying do the best you can to save as many trees that are healthy as possible. In this case, David probably has more of the details on the specifics, but there just weren't too many trees out there that stood up as candidate trees worth preserving.
Yeah, thank you. Councilor Munns, you're up. So, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Okay. Or maybe a statement question, but it's my understanding that if we sold this property, we would give it to a private developer, more than 120 houses would go in, most likely.
I believe that to be a correct statement, yeah. You can certainly maximize this lot to a higher density than we are. We are doing 120 lots because that's the requirement of the grant, but you could develop it to a higher density, yes.
And I believe, this is my personal opinion, that we're going above and beyond, most likely, what a private developer would do.
Certainly some of the enhancements we talked about in terms of architectural guidelines, the proposed trail networks, the other, the fire hardened and fire resilient construction. Yeah, there are definitely things we are doing as the developer that are above and beyond the minimum standards.
And Mr. Bate, if we did sell that property, what do you think just off the top of your head, we'd get how much for it?
We'd have to do a market study. We purchased it in 2008 for 3.2, so
well,
I don't know what it's worth today.
Well, if we had to pay that back, we'd also have to give back, what is it, 23 million?
Well, yeah, we haven't
rest of the
spent
loan?
all of the funding, and we have not drawn all the funding. So right now, we're about 3.5 million.
But with the remaining part of the grant would have to go back.
It would just, it would stay with the state. We would pretty much not request that money. It would stay.
Right. Thank you.
Councilor Resner, so you're up.
While we're at asking questions, I just have a couple that I wrote down for the meeting.
I'll ask some questions.
Spinnaker specifically shows a significant, that's the one area towards the end of Spinnaker that shows a significant increase. Are there any sort of calming measures that, should this project move forward, that we could decide to implement?
We're making Director Webb get his steps in. He's going to come up.
He
and
told me earlier today he was short on steps, so I said I would do my best to help.
I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you for helping me hit my daily goal. That's a great question. I would not recommend implementing traffic calming elements along Spinnaker, such as speed tables, radar feedback signs, or other elements right now. I would wait and see how things turn out. The project itself, just the construction of the infrastructure alone, will likely take 2 full years. And then we will likely see a couple years of building. My gut tells me that we would see the actual vertical build portion of the project proceed in phases, depending on what interim city manager Bade and his team feel like the market is ready to absorb, and that would determine how many lots they would put out for sale. So my recommendation there would be let's wait and see and not overreact now, because we do not have an issue right now, and we don't know for sure if or when we will have an issue. But we do have traffic tools in our tool bag for when subdivisions have speeding or other issues. We have a process for implementing those that we can do downstream. So I would encourage us to wait and see.
You might want to, I mean, you could go back so that you can get steps in case this pertains to you, but I don't think that it does. I know that the proposed park isn't obviously fully designed, but could we, at some point in time during this process, set aside a certain amount of money like we do in traditional sort of development that would say, we're going to put $1 million aside from this project so that we promise that this park gets built out, that sort of thing, those things that we impose on developers?
So for that development side, we would have a contingency.
Okay.
And we would make sure that we had some extra in there for the unforeseeables. So you get comfortable with development once you get above ground a little bit. So once we got to that point, then we could look at our contingency and see if there's something we could do.
And at that point in time, we would also be able to, or Planning Commission would then be able to put various different conditions on materials that were used and fencing or barriers of any sort. Would that, between us and between the new project and the current project, that's usually something that comes before Planning Commission.
Talk for future development of the park?
No, sorry, I moved on to my next question.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Could you repeat it?
I'm sorry, that was very confusing.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that for me, please?
Yes, let me start over and be more clear. My apologies. Typically, Planning Commission, when they're reviewing a project and they're looking at maybe sound barriers or some sort of buffer, those sort of things, in this project, just like in those projects, Planning Commission would be able to condition the types of materials that were used.
As far as build out of the subdivision?
Yes.
That would be done for site design and site conditions, that would be done as part of this process. And then future build out of buildings and homes would come in at building permit level. I don't know if that answers your question.
Mostly I'm thinking between the new development and the current development. Because it sounds like that, right now they have open space. Yes, at the end of this subdivision, obviously this was going to be a connector the entire time.
So
Yes, I'm only asking if on those 4 houses, could Planning Commission say, we would like the fencing that is at the end of the subdivision to look like this?
So
Is that clear enough?
The opportunity for that would be now, because we would condition it as part of the project as a whole for those parcels. After this, if it were to be approved, this would go to building permits. So Planning Commission wouldn't be involved in the issuance of building permits. So if you wanted to place conditions on the map, now would be the time at those particular locations. It will not go back to Planning Commission if approved. It would go to building permits, grading permits and building permits.
Could we talk about that, but could we put a pin in it so we get some feedback from those people that are developing as the options? Because I know this was like, I sat in on a meeting about the options for that. I'd want to hear them again.
Yeah, sounds great.
But keep going.
Oh, that's it. That's the end of my list for now.
So I just read thank you. I love tabs. I really deeply appreciate this, and that you highlighted the ones I really should pay attention to. I read those twice. Okay, so some of the issues that are brought up in here, I think I had the same questions that I wrote as the public comments went down, so I'm going to try to address them all about the same time. But on page 11 in your tab 2, it's talking about, with this attorney, it is talking about you should not be talking about emergency conditions just in ideal situations. So I know several people came up and said, you can't just decide on ideal where everybody's going to line up and evacuate appropriately. So do you want to come back up, Mr. Sutherland, and address, did we only talk about ideal conditions? Did we talk about total chaos? Did we address, I know obviously you've read this, so you know like that's a condition that you can't, it can't just be under perfect circumstances.
Well, I think what you need to look at with this is, we gave them worst-case scenarios of the fire condition.
Okay,
How the actual engineers and how they looked at the road conditions at the time, I'm not privy to that.
oh, that's not yours, okay.
That's
I'm
not
sorry.
me, but
I'm
I
sorry.
gave you
You're-
worst-case scenario
You're off the
from
hook.
fire.
Okay, well, okay, while you're standing there though, they also said, I didn't get the impression that the sides of the street had to be perfectly green and lush in order for them to be safe. But that was the perception. I heard that from several people, like, no, it's brown, it's brush, it's unsafe. So if their impression was that, could you speak to
Well,
what conditions about Court Street should make them feel like they're safe?
So most of Courts, wherever there's housing developments, it's developed. And
Okay.
that is the green and lush that I was talking about. The whole road is not like that.
Okay.
Some of it goes from very rural, some of it's up against county, where I have no control over fuel mitigation in the county. I do, however, in the city property and our right-of-ways. And that is what's addressed in CWPP for us to evaluate and to determine the correct methodology to remove fuels or reduce fuels in the future.
Okay, so you weren't trying to say that it's all green all the way, and
No,
then
it's
that's why they
not
should
green
feel.
all the
Yeah,
way
I didn't think
down.
it was green
No,
either,
not
but
at all.
I want to, it's valid, you know, because this is obviously like, feels like life or death. So this is really important, and it
Well,
is life
fire
or
is
death. It
scary.
is life or death. I
Yeah.
don't mean that, I didn't mean to, and just the feeling in the room, and I know I had to evacuate a house fire, so I know the terror that comes with it. I did not have to evacuate for car fire, so, but I know the terror of feeling like you have to evacuate quickly and your children are in tow. So the other thing I think that I'd ask, and maybe it's you or maybe we'll go back to planning, was I know that the teacher from Foothill had said about the barriers. My first impression when he said that was maybe that was the county side, but did anybody else catch the area that he was talking about when he said it's not striped? Was that the part of Quartz Hill
I'm not
closer to
aware-
Keswick?
I'm not aware of that agreement.
Quartz Hill Road, I'm told, not striped on Quartz Hill Road.
Up closer to Keswick or
You wanna take
just
it?
at the bottom?
It was hard to say what Todd was referring, but somewhere along Quartz Hill Road, it sounds like it's, the visibility of the striping is not good right now. So I would assume it's on top because the new, I mean, it's
Well, he was
not that
talking
old,
about
so.
barriers.
On top?
I just, like, I don't know if those.
So it
but
sounds like
maybe-
it's on top. The
maybe we'll
neighbors
go-
are saying that.
Okay. Was there any other comment, was there any other comment made from the public that you could address from what was said and maybe misunderstood, or they understood it perfectly and you want to speak to it?
No, I think a lot of it is off of their perception of what they saw and lived.
Yeah.
And that is what they felt, and that's what they saw. All I can do is tell you what changes we have done as a city, what other cities do that are very similar to us, and how fires are evaluated and how evacuations are done in communities now compared to what we did then. That's really about it. They have valid concerns. I
Yeah,
mean, all
yes.
of their concerns are valid. They live them. But when you're looking at building systems and you're looking at emergency operations and how we do things in the future, that's how we're viewing this, is that I'm not taking what happened back then and saying, I'm going to take those exact parameters and say, we're going to evacuate the same way, because we wouldn't. We're not going to close the road the same way, because we can't anymore. We won't allow it. So those same conditions in roadway issues, how we evacuate, are not similar. They're not apple-to-apple comparisons anymore. So you have those types of issues, and I'm living in what I know we will do as a city, because we have already. We have done this with the Fawn Fire, we just did it down south with moving ridge lines. We have used this system to evacuate and to shelter in place already. So it has been used in our county and has been used successfully to evacuate areas of our town.
So on the next page, on page 12, because basically on page 11 of this, it does talk about, you can't talk about ideal evacuation scenarios. It's asking them to properly evaluate just the danger and the risk. And then the next page talks about how you mitigate for that. And so I don't want to confuse the mitigation with downplaying the risk. Because kind of some of the communication could seem like we're downplaying the risk by talking about mitigation efforts, that as though a perfect evacuation plan takes your risk away. It doesn't. What they're
No.
saying is that we have to have some kind of a plan, and circumstances will be different. So that's how I read that, is that you have to then mitigate for it. So when we talk about mitigation efforts, I'm just really talking to all of you. When we're talking about mitigation efforts, because it's very clear, you have to have a very clear risk assessment, and then a mitigation for those things. So, I mean, this is actually very good instruction, I think, for what we actually came up as a plan. But again, it's just a plan. Okay, thank you, you're off the hook. I
Not a problem.
appreciate that.
Anybody
Are you
else?
gonna stick around for if
Oh, yeah,
any
I'll
of
be
them
here the
have
whole time.
questions? I saw somebody raising their hand, so maybe if they have questions for you or more concerns or direct concerns, they can talk to you after?
Yes,
Okay,
sure can.
thank you.
If I may, Councilmember
yeah,
Audette,
yeah,
I had a point of clarification I thought
Yes.
was worth mentioning.
Please.
So in page 11, those highlighted sections of text, I think it's important to note, this is actually more in the absence of an evacuation model.
Yes.
So if you back up to page 10, you'll see that the Attorney General encourages us to do an evacuation model,
Right.
not required. But it does say at that last bullet point, traffic modeling to quantify travel times under various likely scenarios.
Right.
So that's what we attempted to do. That's actually what's referenced in the WTrans report. And then it says at the top of page 11, in considering these evacuation and emergency access impacts, lead agencies, Reading, may use existing resources and analyses. And so what it's saying, and what we've actually done in 2 previously approved subdivisions where we didn't require them to do an evacuation model, they use these bullet points in lieu of an evacuation model. So I want to be careful. This bullet point isn't saying this is how you should do your evacuation model. It's actually saying if you don't do an evacuation model, do X, Y, Z. And I think it's a really important distinction. I just wanted to make you aware.
I think what I heard from the public, though, is the perception, when we're talking about mitigation efforts, it seems like the fear, there's many, but part of it is, are you saying that we don't have the same risk because you're talking about mitigations as though those take away those risks? And we're like, no, this is a great letter. This is great guidance. And I think it holds cities or developers or whomever accountable to really be thoughtful and think through these things and to validate these risks and then have a plan for them. So
Correct.
It's actually a very good letter. So, okay. I just want to address some of the things that came up during the public comment. So is the city making millions of dollars on this? Because if we are, I'd like to know that. We've got some real budget issues. And could you maybe, I know this is going to be, I know that this is like a 3 to 5 year thing. No one's going to see a house for a minimum of 3 years.
Correct.
If that. And this, what we approve, only is the structure, the infrastructure. There's no house is done at the end of this. Once, if this is a yes and we move forward, and it was all completed, there'd be no houses. So this process is probably a 2-year process and estimated, and it's infrastructure.
Correct.
So, are we making millions on that? Are we doing this for monetary gain?
No. So the construction of this is going to be paid for by the grant.
Okay,
And then once that construction contract is done, which we believe, because we want to really push the design of this, we want to spend the grant. That's what the grant is to utilize to create this infrastructure, and we want to make sure that it's a well-designed, well-appointed neighborhood. So we are going to spend the grant. We're not going to leave a dollar on the table,
Okay.
probably. But beyond that, once we're done with this project, infrastructure is all done, and you have just dirt lots, similar to what you see at maybe Jeb Allen's, out there off of Rancho Road. You're seeing just dirt lots and infrastructure, shovel-ready. Those lots, when we go to develop that, we're going to negotiate an agreement, present it to city council for consideration, and then there's going to be some buying and selling of the income-restricted lots and the market rate lots. As those dollars come back in, some of those dollars will be used for the secondary financing on the income qualifying. It could get expensive. You're doing $100,000 or $150,000 per lot at 61 lots. You're looking at $6 million. So we use
So
a
the
combination.
sale of the lot actually funds the
We're gonna-
workforce.
we're
It's
going-
workforce housing is really what
Yes,
we're looking at.
exactly. Yes,
It's
so we're gonna
workforce
reuse
housing, not
those dollars.
affordable housing.
Workforce,
Nothing's affordable
income
in California.
qualifying.
It's workforce housing.
Yeah,
Okay.
it can, yep, so those are used very interchangeably today, yes. But those dollars as they come back in, now we may say, all right, we didn't get a chance to really do all of the development we want in the park, and maybe city council will say, you know what? Take those extra dollars from those market rate units and invest them in that park. Or city council will say, take those dollars that you got off that and put it in your revolving loan fund for other income qualifying housing projects in the city. It's hard to say. It'll be a couple of years before that decision is made.
And does it stay in housing?
Yes.
It's not coming into our general fund?
No, we have a local affordable housing loan fund, and that's where those dollars would go. Those are
Okay.
dollars that we control locally, city
For
council.
housing funds, for
direct.
our requirements for building housing from the state of California, all that kind of stuff?
Correct.
Okay.
So, well, we separate it. We keep them separate.
Yes, of
Federal, state,
course.
and local.
Of course, we
because
would
have
never
to, but yes,
commingle funds. Okay.
These would be local funds.
Yes, got it. Okay, and when we say that it's a 50-year, I'm not sure the language, if it's a covenant or whatever, or a thing that's on there, we don't mean that we're gonna be giving 50-year mortgages. We're saying that it will have that that market or that workforce subsidy for, I know that there's some wiggle room on that, but between 25 and 50 years, not that we're doing 50-year mortgages.
No, we're not doing 50-year
Okay, good.
mortgages. It's
Wanna
a
make sure.
restriction on the property.
On the restriction might say
Not
there for 50
a
years.
50-year mortgage. It's
Okay.
a standard, conventional 30-year.
Noel will be, or Noel will be very happy to hear that. That's not happening. Okay. All right. Okay, on the issue of Buenaventura to Harlan. Okay, so I'd love another route. I don't want you going through my river trail to get it at the end of Harlan. But I do appreciate the idea. I appreciate the effort. I'm assuming we thought about that or figured out like what the cost of that, and we don't have money to be putting into that stuff. Or maybe we do, I don't know. But could you give a high-level 30-second why
I'll give
we
a-
are not exploring that?
Correct. So because it's off-site and it's not conditioned with the project, therefore it's not eligible for our grant funding.
Okay, all right. Okay. Can I ask, I know, I have sat in a lot of different meetings. We had that outdoor one. And can I ask Alan, would you be willing to sort of talk about why this development is a good idea? No? Okay, you're tired? You've already given too many speeches today? I mean, I'd appreciate it. You can say no. I mean, you could try. I'll just ask 7 more times. No, I won't. I promise I won't ask. You can sit down if you want. You don't have to. But I would really appreciate if you would. Okay. Good answer. Good answer. Let's clap. Okay. I want to just say that the most compelling aspect of the idea of this project is that we would make the area safer. We'd make insurance, it would help your insurance rates. It would help just the safety of the area. It would be vegetation management. And I mean, that to me is the selling feature. So it is such a hard, I think, decision when the perception is the opposite. So I know that you have a good vision for this because you've been out there. I know you've been everywhere. and you're exhausted, I can tell. It's been a
I'm
long
not
day.
exhausted, I'm
It's been
good.
a long day. I appreciate you being willing, but I do think you have a vision for the area, and I'm not asking you to agree or disagree, just like, what's the vision for that, and how do you think it's gonna be a benefit to the area?
Well, a couple things kind of happened. I'm Alan with K2 Development, and we were retained by the city of Reading through an RFP process to run this project on behalf of the city and ensure that we're using the state grants funds correctly and to get the most out of them. So there's really two things that we look at it. One, if I just took the project hat off and I just went from pure economic development, housing in general is the #1 economic driver in a community. If you're building housing stock, you're driving the economy. So a $23 million grant in a community, usually you'd take that amount of money and you'd multiply it by 2.5 to 3 times for economic benefit impact to the community. And in a typical project like this, this would be a larger percentage, but you'd be at about 50% of that would hire local wages in a public works activity. So there's large benefits to our community, especially in a time that we're in a financially unstable environment, to bringing these great jobs and economic stimulus to our community through the state money that otherwise another city would get, and we would now San Francisco benefits or LA benefits. Whether this is the project or another project, we want to bring the money to Reading that we've paid our hard-earned money and taxes for. So when we started looking at where the money came from CAR Fire funding, we really leaned into fire resiliency in the neighborhood. So we have actually hired RGA architects out of Chico to put together a design architectural review package that will go on file with the property to ensure that when it's time for a developer to come in and build the homes, that the homes are built with the intent of the neighborhood. And we work with IBHS, which is the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. It's probably the most recognized by insurance companies out there because this is a severe fire zone. And so we would be the second project in the state of California to adopt a project that goes after those fire hardening measures, which would be non-combustible space around the homes of 5 feet. The entire neighborhood would not be able to have combustible fencing materials. So all the fencing materials, no vinyl, no metal, it'd all be non-combustible. Fire hardening of the type A roof systems, non-combustible eaves, and exterior hardening on the siding. So we're talking stucco or hardy. Vegetation management would be required by the neighborhood. The neighborhood is also managed by an LMD, a landscape maintenance district, that everyone will have to pay into to ensure that the area around their homes is managed for fire mitigation measures. We've also designed the neighborhood to minimize the slope rating of the neighborhood. And when you're in your insurance underwriting, they look at your slope rating, which is how steep the hills are around your home, to ensure, because fire likes to run up a steeper slope. So a lot of the design in the neighborhood took that into consideration to ensure that we had a better slope rating. The reality of all of these measurements, if IBHS is still recognized in 3, 4, 5 years when the homes are built, is that this should actually create a fire buffer for the adjacent neighborhoods, because these homes are going to be very difficult for the fire to not only get into, but to jump from home to home, because all the homes will be designed and built with the fire hardening measures. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
And a couple other things. We are going to do front porch living. We actually won a project award about 7 years ago for a project where most of the homes are required. All the homes had front porches. So also in these guidelines will be front porch requirements of all the homes to encourage neighborhood living. Something that we see in a community that drives, #1 thing that drives happiness is good relationship with your neighbors. That's why you see so many people here that are all banded together, is because that's a #1 driver of community, is having a good relationship with your neighbors. We don't always want them to come and see our messy houses, but we might enjoy a glass of wine on the front porch. And so at least we can do that part. So a big part of the neighborhood was trying to create the trail system. We took the best piece of property, because the River Ridge neighborhood was promised a park, and they were actually given a poor piece of property for a park. It's actually a drainage area, which would not make a very good park. And so we took the best piece of property in this neighborhood and actually are going to grade it to be the park, which is the highest peak in all of the 120 acres. And so that will be graded out. It's right off the main road, and it will connect back into the River Ridge through a walking trail that would go to where that original park was. So, ideally, there's enough funding at the end of this project that we can really lean into that park and create something amazing that the whole community can enjoy.
Do you want to talk about for these 4, is it just the 4 houses that have the neighbors behind it? Your question that you had?
It sounds like that's been taken into account.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's something the city could certainly, you as a council could put on, is to create a greater setback requirement on those homes to ensure that we're not following the traditional 15-foot setback. That would just be a condition put on the parcel, so the future home builder would have to follow a larger easement or setback between those homes and the adjacent homes, which would have both a greater setback and there's also an elevation difference. So certainly something I think you could consider, and it would not hurt the integrity of the project, and I think would be warranted for the neighbors that are adjacent to those properties. And so something we could work through in the completion of the final map.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I have just 3 quick questions, and not necessarily for you, but you can stay there because you might like to answer them. For me, this boils down to 3 things. 1, can Jack Baker build this bridge for $24 million with a guarantee and a bond to make sure it's a success? And is he willing to offer that to the city with some kind of guarantee and bond? That's one question. And Jack, you don't have to answer this right now, but that's something which can be a really great gift to the city. So the second question is there any mechanism you see in the future, this is more for Public Works and the city manager, that could we kind of, not as a condition of approval to this project, but could we envision some kind of a bond or some kind of a tax district or something which can fund that $24 million? That's the second question. Can you answer on that second part? I don't want Jack to be put on the spot for this.
I mean, it's always, we could certainly look at bonding capacity for the bridge at some point. I think it's important to realize that all of city staff, we continue to look at opportunities, if there's a way to get that bridge, we will keep that in our.
I want this to go up on the priority list.
Yeah, so, well, and I'll let, I think we should let Director Webb to talk about, they do have a CIP that they prioritize our public works projects. And I believe it's in the CIP, but I'm not sure where the standing is on that project compared to all of the infrastructure in the city of Reading. But he could express where they're at and where other funds have been expended over time. Okay. I know some, there are houses up there that do pay into a traffic impact fee, and he could give a little more detail on what has been completed to date.
Okay, do you want to do that? Just a quick 60 seconds version, if you have.
I think he's conferring.
Yeah. And then I have one more question after that, I'll be done. Yeah.
Councilmember Danuka, could you please repeat your question? Sorry.
So the second question was, do you foresee a kind of a pragmatic possibility that we can somehow, not just with the grants, but also generate some revenue or with a bond or some kind of tax district to build that bridge?
Certainly, and I'll need Director Pagan to help me with this to make sure that I get this correct. We do have the ability through specific plans, right, to condition certain infrastructure as a requirement of development. I believe we've done that before, Oasis Road specific plan and others, so that would be something that could be looked at, but I'm assuming we're a little late in the game.
No, not for this project. I don't mean that, for the future.
For other projects in
Yes.
that area? Yes, I'm assuming we could have that conversation. That would be something that would be brought to this body, and part of that conversation could be collecting fees specifically for similar improvements.
Or with some bonds. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's the last thing I want to say is Jack brought up a very, very good point, and I'm actually thankful for you to bring that point. That's a question, and also it's something for me. It's going to be a really critical deciding factor. He brought that if we give this to a private developer, they do not have to live by this density. They can actually build twice the number of homes that city is presenting right now, is proposing right now. They can build 240, right? So No, I'm sorry? How many more, but chances are maybe more. So can you clarify that? And the two questions I have for you is this. If you give it to a private developer, what is the max they can build? Number one. Number two, given the legal framework, our general plan, how much, if they decide, if they come in tomorrow to build 240 houses, can city really say no to that? Or will be in a position that legally we won't be able to say no, then you'll be stuck with 240 houses in place of 120, and then you'll have more of a density problem, more of a crowding problem, more of a setback problem, and more of an evacuation problem.
So our general plan designation, I'm looking at my senior planner here, 2 to 3.5 units per acre. So in theory, a private property owner also could request a rezone of the property in the future, as long as it was within the bounds of our general plan range. And so, yeah, you could certainly see, I can't surmise how much more housing could go in there, but for a private developer, they're going to need to make money on the project. They need to make the most efficient use of the land. So a rezone could result in a higher density of housing. I don't know if it'd be double. We could do some back of the napkin calculations. I see my city attorney telling me to stop talking.
Yeah, so I've got a slightly different question I was going to suggest posing to the planning director. The rezone is not something that you would be legally required to do, because that's a legislative action. So, and I think what Member Danuka or Vice Mayor Danuka is getting at is essentially what would you be required to approve if this were coming forward with a private developer. So I would suggest the density on the existing zoning.
Existing zone.
Sure, so that would be a discretionary act in the future that, yeah, you wouldn't have to say yes to. So with the existing zoning, you want to?
I can definitely add to that. There's two ways to calculate density: gross developable area and net. This project's using net developable area. So we have portions of property that the city's going to retain in parcels A and B, park site. Developer could use those areas for developable area and build on the same footprint a lot more homes by just calculating the density a little bit differently. And so we are doing it at a net density on the, so we're of the 114 acres, we're developing a 65 point something acre area, and 20% slopes encumber where density can go on that portion, brings it down to 48 roughly. And so that brings us at a net density for the developable area of the entire 114 acres of what we're proposing to you. And what I'm trying to say is a developer could look at the remaining area, set it aside as a remainder, and develop a lot more units in that same footprint.
So they could, theoretically, they could say, hey, because it's 114 acre total, so from 40, you're developing like 40 plus, and they can say 110, so they can go up to 2.5 times.
Well, yeah, at 2.5 units per acre, you're at several hundred or more units of housing.
So that, I think, we as a community need to look at, including the neighbors as well as city staff, as well as us, that which one, I mean, let's just say that if you think this project is gonna increase the density, increase the traffic problem, increase the evacuation problem, what is the alternative? If a developer comes tomorrow and says, I'm gonna develop the maximum density, you may be left with the worst off option. That may be a bigger problem than 120 houses. I'm just thinking loud here. So does it make sense what I'm saying? So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry. And we won't be able to stop that. Most likely not.
Well,
Yes.
I was going to say, I mean, it's still a discretionary approval, a tentative map approval.
Yeah, so the developer would have rights to have a map approved as long as it complied with the findings that were required under the code. And that was the area where, when the Planning Commission was reviewing this, I think some of them heard some of the community's concerns, but they really, because they were not the proponents, they really had to evaluate it under the same grounds as a private developer. You know, they really felt that they had to make those findings based on the facts that were in front of them. So unless, based on the facts in front of you, you find that you wouldn't be able to make those four findings provided under the code, then yes, you would have to go ahead and approve that project.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute recess. I wish I could say there's ice cream in the back. We can't afford it, but give us a year. We'll make recess very exciting. So we'll be back here in 10 minutes. All right, we are going to start. Hope you enjoyed your recess. And we're going to start discussion here and questions. So we're going to go to Councilor Resner. So
I simply wanted to retract my motion to continue.
okay. More questions, discussion. Is there a motion?
I actually, can I just ask a quick question?
Okay.
I think my question to Mr. Webb was not very clear earlier, maybe perhaps. Do you have the room to bring this bridge up on the priority list, and how would you do that?
So thank you. So to be clear, the Buenaventura Bridge is listed in our current citywide general plan. However, there is no identified funding source for the bridge, so it has never been included in our citywide capital improvement plan, which is a document that spans a 10-year horizon. It includes all of the proposed capital investments. So that would be our bridges, our paving, our sidewalk, work to fire stations, work to City Hall, work to this structure, anything that's a capital investment, roundabouts, traffic signals, streetlights, all of it. I can put that bridge into our capital improvement plan. It will go into the plan in the unfunded category, which means it's in there, but there's no funding for that. We can definitely do that. What I was alluding to earlier, and I just unfortunately couldn't remember the correct term, we could form a special benefit district, which I believe is the correct term up in this area, which would then require all the lots within that district, and I'm going to defer to Director Pagan to make sure I don't put my foot in my mouth in this, but we could do that and require.
I think, I'm sorry, I've cut off Director Webb. There's some legal requirements with respect to the creation of a separate funding mechanism, most of which involve votes of the owners within the area which you're looking to assess. We are getting a little bit of field of the item that's in front of you.
Okay.
If you would like, this is something that could come back as a separate
But
item.
there is some mechanism to put it up on the priority list, put in a CIP and some other options. That's what I need to know. There are some ways we can look at and bring it back, right?
There are. We could also look at including it in our citywide traffic impact fee program. I would just remind council that if we did that, that would be absorbed by development across the city, and we would very likely hear that from the development community that we're stifling development by forcing them to pay for a large number of infrastructure improvements around town.
And it would likely increase the TIF fee, I would think, significantly, because it's a huge project.
No, I understand that. But there are some ways. Just a quick question, just a follow-up question I thought of for Mr. Pagan, if you will be willing to answer. That's it, Mr. Webb. Thank you. Just the follow-up on my point earlier that if we give this land to a private developer, they can increase the density. Could you just follow up on that as, what if this private developer wants to put an affordable housing apartment building, which is like for whatever number, 3-4 stories, would that be possibility there?
So it's single-family zoned, and so they could come in and propose a single-family zone neighborhood, single-family neighborhood. And we were just doing a little bit of math here, so I could give you a good number. But basically, if someone came in tomorrow, purchased the property, and submitted an application to develop, we think they'd likely be able to get 200 to 220 units of housing at the zoning it is today.
Okay. And the city will be in a tough spot, then it won't be easy to just say no to that because that's within the rights to ask for that, right?
Correct. They would meet our zoning designation. They'd of course be held to the standards and codes.
Yeah.
It would meet our general plan. So the findings it would be difficult to make findings to deny that project.
That kind of solves this puzzle for me. Thank you.
The question, we were talking about recommended setbacks and trying to identify the best lots. I believe lot 72, 73. Am I missing one more lot or two other lots that came up in discussion? That would
78, 77.
78, 77. So I would like to see a 30-foot setback as a condition on those four lots. So that would be something of interest for me. Is that something that would be feasible in those four lots?
If I may, Director Pig and I, during the break, were discussing some of the procedural mechanisms for this. We were not sure that you'd be able to do that with a private developer, but you are the applicant in this case. So rather than establishing it as a condition of the approval of the subdivision, which is the subject of the hearing, you can just direct staff to go ahead and make a change. And then I will defer to Director Pagan in terms of the feasibility of that specific number.
Yeah, when we were discussing that, I think it'd be a minor enough change. We could actually handle that administratively. So it could be a director level change to the map later on. I'm going to look. You were comfortable with that? So if that's the direction, we can handle that outside of the hearing, so long as we're directed by you here tonight.
Are there any other lots that would be good for setbacks? I think those were the only four that
Those
came
are
up
the
in
only
discussion.
Yeah, they're the only ones that have houses behind them.
Okay. All right, here we are.
30 the right number?
That's what we were
That
just
would be a
talking about.
doubling of our rear lot setback. That seems reasonable. I mean, you don't want to limit, we've heard from the consultant team, you don't want to limit the actual development on the lot after setting up some buffer. So 30 feet seems like we could achieve that.
Great.
Great. You need,
So here we are.
do you need a motion
We
or we
would need
just?
some thought if we're going to move forward or either deny the appeal or accept it or so. And
I'll make a motion that we approve the subdivision, or what's the proper
Oh, you
language?
need, is this one of those scenarios where yes means yes and no means no?
There is that risk. And I'm apologize, my battery died. If someone can hand me the agenda with the recommended action. I believe you'll be voting to deny the appeal
And uphold.
and to uphold the decision of the Planning Commission. And then if you want to add the direction to staff to make the change with respect to the 30-foot setback, you could include that in the same motion as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'll make the motion to uphold the planning commission as well as the 30-foot setback.
I'll second.
And before we vote, just clarity, we don't get to vote because of our gut feeling. If we vote no, we need to have a finding. And how do we address that? This vote is definitely different than other actions that we've had in the
Yeah,
past.
so with respect to the appeal, and in particular with the CEQA determination, you really need to have it, that decision limited to the particular facts in the record, in particular the germane information. So like for the CEQA analysis, for example, you wouldn't be basing that on what you might do in the future. You're basing that on the project as presented, even though there was some discussion about the other possibilities, et cetera. And the same in terms of the findings in the appeal with respect to the specific findings made approving the subdivision. You as the applicant, and this is where this one is weird, because you are both the approver and the applicant, you also have ability to go ahead and give directions separate and apart from the appeal, which is where we got into the 30-foot setback as to any changes that you would like to make.
Okay. And clarifying again, the yes and the no vote. I know that gets
deny- yeah,
confusing. So yeah,
Deny application, uphold planning commission, And then the 30-foot
Yes.
setback.
And a yes is to deny, a no is to, yes. got it.
Just for the record, could you? Just for the record, for your motion, I agree with that. Just to clarify, do we have the ability to say that we have not found any reason or finding to overturn Planning Commission's decision?
Yeah, we're upholding
Yeah,
their.
we're upholding because we have not, I want to make sure that we had the language, that we have not found, we haven't discovered any finding to reverse it.
And,
Well, that's already in the.
They're not,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And if I may, I'm sorry, I think the motion, when we were discussing it, I might have skipped over the environmental action. I would suggest for clarification, it sounds like the motion is those actions recommended in the written staff report. If the motion is the recommended action plus the direction of the 30-foot setback, I would recommend just clarifying that before the vote.
Yeah, thank you, correct.
Okay.
Okay, we have a first and a second. We're going to take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That passes 5-0. Okay, where's our, I don't think we have an item 12. No, we're just going to adjourn. So we are going to adjourn, and thank you, everybody, for coming today.
Thank you.